Chapter 1. The sedan swayed rhythmically. The cheerful music and the chatter and laughter of the bridal procession were loud and lively. The matron of honor's auspicious words rang in Sang-won's ears. Sang-won gently lifted the red veil, and what greeted her eyes was a bright red. She was finally sure that she was sitting in the red sedan for her wedding. She gently lifted her hands to take a closer look. Her skin was white and delicate, her nails were glossy and full, her fingers were slender and long, and her palms were small and delicate. This was a pair of healthy and elastic hands. This was indeed the pair of hands she once had. She was reborn. Her initial panic gradually calmed down. At this moment, she had completely calmed down and accepted this fact. She was reborn. Would she have to relive that withered and hopeless life again? Sang-won couldn't help but shiver. Her nails subconsciously dug into her palms. It was cold to the core. No. She definitely didn't want to relive that gloomy and hopeless life. Sang-won clenched her fists tightly and resisted the urge to lift the curtains of the sedan. She knew that outside the thin curtain of the sedan, there was a handsome man wearing a red wedding robe and a red silk flower. He was riding a tall horse and was following beside the sedan. That was her husband, the husband whom she had never met in this life but had lived with for 4 years in her previous life. He was the eldest son of the Shi family's eldest son, Shi Fengju, who was the wealthiest family in Qingzhou. Thinking of her husband, the coldness in Sang-won's heart deepened. An indescribable sense of sadness gradually spread from the bottom of her heart, and her rationality was tightly grasped. She could barely breathe. Back then, she also had a beautiful vision and sweet yearning as she stepped onto the bridal sedan to go to the Shi family. However, what greeted her was one shock after another, forcing her to have no place to stand. Her parents died early, her family declined, and she married into the richest family in Qingzhou. Other than longing and yearning, she was more nervous and perturbed. She was afraid. She was truly afraid. Afraid that her mother-in-law, husband, and sister-in-law would look down on her. Afraid that the servants of the Shi family would despise her. Afraid that she would make a fool of herself because she hadn't seen the world. Afraid. She was afraid of the unknown of the Shi family and everything that she had to face. Her only hope was her husband. If he respected her and protected her, then her life would be much better. To her, he was like a life-saving straw, the only thing she could rely on. However, the truth was so cruel. He had a childhood sweetheart and a cousin whom he loved dearly. Less than 2 months after she married, his cousin Gu Fengzi became Aunt Gu. Then, everything she was worried about and afraid of had happened. Her mother-in-law didn't like her, her husband treated her coldly, and all the servants despised and looked down on her. Behind her back, they made up a lot of things to ridicule her for being petty. She gradually became the heir at home, forgotten in a remote corner, until her heart died day by day, and her body withered day by day. That kind of life of being completely ignored, abandoned, and isolated was more painful than all the torture in the world. It was enough to drive a normal living person crazy. She didn't want to be like this, but no one gave her a chance, no one. Sang-won's mouth gently curved into a sarcastic smile. Previously, she was numb and desperate, so she didn't want to think about it. Now that the fragments of the past were replaying in her mind one after another, she suddenly realized that Gu Fengzi, this woman, had been helping her from the beginning, but she had made a fool of herself again and again, causing her to anger her mother-in-law and husband again. Such a sweet smile, such a kind laughter, such a friendly attitude, how could it be fake? But it was fake. She expressed goodwill to her, and she was so surprised, grateful, and trusting. She completely accepted her without the slightest doubt, but in the end, she reaped her own depressed and miserable life. The bride alighted from the sedan. The bridesmaid's sharp and loud voice with a festive smile interrupted Sang-won's thoughts. The music outside the sedan became louder, and the laughter of the crowd became more lively. From the sound of it, this was indeed a good day for celebration. She was back again. She stepped into the Shi family once again and became the Shi family's daughter-in-law. Sang-won's mind was in a daze, and she felt her heart beating violently. She was so nervous that it almost jumped out of her throat. She took a deep breath and suppressed her wildly beating heart. She stretched out her slender hand and gently placed it on the bridesmaid's hand, allowing her to help her out of the sedan, and stuffed the end of the red silk into her hand. She had no choice. Even if she knew that the road ahead was rugged and bumpy, she could only continue to walk. Fortunately, everything had just begun. Everything, there was still room for change. Since God had let her live a tragic life again, then she must not let it down. Being reborn at this moment, this was God's will, this was compensation, and this was also a challenge. Countless voices filled her ears. Just like in her previous life, Sangwon felt as if her head was about to explode. She was dizzy like a puppet that was being manipulated by others. Obediently, she obeyed the orders one by one until she was sent to the bridal chamber. She sat on the bed that was decorated with golden paintings of mountains and rivers. The noisy world finally quieted down, but Sangwon's heart could not help but feel a little uncertain. The closer the two of them were to face each other, the more nervous she felt. It was one thing to recognize and accept reality, but it was another to integrate into reality. Her husband, that familiar yet strange man, strange yet familiar man, how was she going to get along with him? Sangwon felt a headache coming on. The heavy phoenix crown felt heavier and heavier, as if it was about to break her neck. Sangwon took a deep breath and gently lifted the veil. She carefully took off the phoenix crown and gently placed it on the red brocade quilt embroidered with cross-necked mandarin ducks and intertwined lotus flowers. Missy, no, this is against the rules. You should quickly wear it. When the dowry maid, Luya, saw it, she immediately widened her eyes in shock and stammered. The Shi family was indeed the richest family in Qingzhou. The wedding of the eldest son of the first wife was extravagant, ostentatious, and particular. In just half a day, Luya was already overwhelmed and dazzled. She could not help but feel a sense of inferiority. She was so nervous that she did not know where to put her hands and feet. When she saw that her missy had actually lifted the red veil, she was shocked. It's fine, no one will know. My neck is so sore, it's about to break. I'll rest for a while before putting it back on. Don't worry. Sangwon twisted her neck and raised her hand to massage it. Indeed, it felt much better and she could not help but let out a sigh of relief. But, this is inauspicious. It's fine. Inauspicious? In her previous life, she followed the rules well and sat stiffly for half a day without even daring to move a finger. But in the end, was it auspicious? How inauspicious could it be? But, this is against the rules. The Shi family will laugh at it. Only the heavens, the earth, you, and I know. As long as we don't say it, who will know? Sangwon blinked her eyes and smiled. Missy, you are really... Luya grew up in the countryside with her and was not very strict with the rules. Seeing Sangwon smile like this, she could not help but smile as well. Her nervous heart gradually calmed down. After a tiring day, are you hungry? Sangwon asked with a smile. Luya quickly nodded and shook her head. All right. Suddenly, she realized something and took out a pink handkerchief from her lapel. In the handkerchief were 2 pieces of biscuits. She held it up and offered it to Sangwon. Missy, this was given by young mistress when we came. She said that it can fill your stomach. This servant almost forgot. The young mistress that Luya was referring to was Sangwon's sister-in-law, Fong. It's hard for sister-in-law to still think of me. Sangwon's nose turned sour and she almost cried. In her previous life, because of her weakness and ignorance, she brought her brother and sister-in-law to the Shi family as guests and suffered a great grievance. Her sister-in-law was someone who could not tolerate sand in her eyes. At that time, she made a big fuss and threatened to cut all ties with her. She then dragged her brother and niece away angrily. From then on, they really did not have any contact with her. Because of this, not only did the servants in the Shi family laugh at her behind her back, her mother-in-law and husband were also very displeased. It's true. Young mistress is very, very good to Missy. She has a sharp tongue but a soft heart. Luya looked at the biscuit that Sangwon took and held in her hands. She subconsciously swallowed a mouthful of it. Sang-won felt warmth in her heart. She took a piece of biscuit and handed the other to Luya. "Here, let's each have a piece." "Ai, thank you, Missy." Luya received it happily and opened her mouth to eat. "Missy," Luya suddenly stopped and looked at Sang-won with a smile. "Young master's family is so rich, who knows how many delicious things there are. In the future, Missy will be able to enjoy a good life. This servant will also be able to bask in Missy's glory." Luya's dark eyes were sparkling, and her pretty oval face was filled with innocence and longing. The corner of her mouth held a hint of a smile, just like how she was in the past. Sang-won's heart instantly sank, as though a bone was stuck in her throat. "Luya," Sang-won pondered for a moment before looking at Luya seriously, "we grew up together, and I have always treated you as a younger sister. There are some things that I won't hide from you. With my family background, marrying into a family like the Sher family, and my husband being the eldest son of the first wife, I'm afraid that our lives won't be good." "How can that be?" Luya was shocked. "You are the young mistress of the Sher family, and you married into the family through a matchmaker." "That's precisely why we won't have a good life," Sang-won said firmly. "Our Sang family is now like this, and I'm afraid that our family's wealth can't even compare to the respectable servants of the Sher family. Think about it, with me in a high position, how can others be convinced? This way, there will be a lot of trouble." Luya was still in a daze as she stared blankly at Sang-won. She forced a smile and shook her head. This servant still doesn't understand." Sang-won smiled bitterly. Luya was careless, and life in the countryside was simple, so it wasn't strange that she didn't understand. "Forget it. Luya, you just need to listen to me. In this household, don't take a step more than necessary, and don't say a word more than necessary. Do you understand?" "Yes, I understand. I just need to listen to Missy." Luya let out a sigh of relief and smiled. The two of them looked at each other. The sky was getting dark, and Sang-won had already put on the phoenix coronet and covered her head with a veil, sitting upright on the bed. Hearing the sound of light footsteps and cheerful laughter gradually approaching, Sang-won's palms tightened again, and her body stiffened. Chapter 2. With a creak, the door was gently pushed open from the outside. The sound of the matron of honor laughing and singing flowed into their ears like flowing water. Following behind them were the bridegroom and the serving maids. "All right, all of you can leave." She Fengju suddenly interrupted the matron of honor, and the smooth and auspicious words came to an abrupt end. Sang-won remained motionless, but her eyes flashed under the veil. His voice was still so clear and pleasant to the ears, but it was very faint, extremely faint. She could even imagine his expression when he said those words. That expression would definitely be even fainter. Yes. The matron of honor was the most famous matchmaker in Qingzhou. She was used to traveling from village to village, so there was no one in the city who did not know about the relationships between men and women in the surrounding villages. Of course, she was very clear about the relationship between the Sher family's eldest son and his aunt's cousin, Gu Fengzi, who was in love with each other. If not for the fact that the marriage with the Sang family was set when the old master was still alive, and if not for the fact that the Sher family did not want to break off the marriage, the position of the Sher family's eldest young mistress would not have anything to do with Sang-won. However, it seemed that even though Sang-won had married into the Sher family and become the Sher family's eldest young mistress, she might not be able to hold on to her position. The matron of honor gave a meaningful glance and pursed her lips. The group of maids, including Luya, held their breaths and left the room. The door was gently closed, and the large room was silent. The atmosphere was a little oppressive. Being in a world of red, Shi Fengju's originally oppressive mood became even more oppressive. He never knew that such a bright, warm, and ostentatious color could bring such an oppressive feeling to people. Sure enough, one's appearance was born from one's heart. His gaze swept across the big red double happiness character sprinkled with gold dust and the dragon and phoenix candles burning high. Shi Fengju's eyes dimmed and he fell into a daze. Forget it. He secretly let out a sigh of relief and pushed away all his unhappiness. Since he had complied with the marriage agreement and married the Sang family's young mistress, as long as she wasn't unreliable, she would forever be the Shi family's young mistress and Shi Fengju's legal wife. Cousin, Feng, she said that she understood him. She did. And he would not let her down. Shi Fengju subconsciously rubbed his fists and walked forward steadily. He picked up the wedding scale tied with red silk flowers on the big red tray and gently lifted Sangwon's big red veil, revealing her bright pearl coronet. The pearls and jade ornaments on the phoenix coronet trembled slightly. The woman wearing the phoenix coronet gently raised her head, and a pair of clear eyes deeply reflected in his eyes. Her eyes were so bright that they could compete with the brilliance of pearls. Her eyelashes fluttered gently, making her seem even more lively. Shi Fengju was stunned for a moment. In just a moment, his eyes returned to calmness, as calm as water. He looked at Sangwon without saying anything. Instead, he turned to the table and poured 2 cups of wine. He handed one to Sangwon and held the other in his hand. After drinking this cup of wine, the ceremony is complete. It's getting late, let's rest. Shi Fengju said in a flat voice. After saying that, he raised his head and drank his cup of wine in one gulp. Sangwon looked at him and could not help but marvel at the magic of fate. Just like in her previous life, he drank the wine that was supposed to be drunk for the sake of friendship, and then, he did not even think about the fact that she had been hungry for the whole day. Of course, Sangwon's thoughts at this moment were not because she wanted to drink the wine for the sake of friendship, but because she felt wronged and unjust as a bride. Why aren't you drinking? Shi Fengju finished the wine in his cup and turned to put it down. Then, he turned around and walked toward her. He wanted to pull her into the ceremony of a married couple, but he saw that she was still holding the cup of wine in her hand in a daze. He could not help but frown slightly and become a little impatient. What the hell? Sangwon looked at him, and her hand paused. She simply put the wine cup in her hand aside. You. Shi Fengju was shocked and said coldly, What do you mean? Dalong. Sangwon stood up, brushed her sleeves, and curtsied to Shi Fengju. She raised her head and looked directly at him. She said without avoiding his gaze, Actually, Dalong has another sweetheart. Dalong doesn't want to marry me, right? Shi Fengju did not expect her to say this and was very surprised. His first reaction was to think that he had misheard. When he came back to his senses, he raised his eyebrows. His nature as a businessman made him very calm. He asked calmly, What are you trying to say? Sangwon lowered her head slightly, revealing her slender, snow-white neck. Her eyelashes trembled slightly as she looked up and said, Sangwon is very grateful that Dalong has honored the marriage agreement and saved face for the Sang family and Sangwon. However, since Dalong has another sweetheart in his heart, Sangwon does not want to take away someone else's love. How about you and I become a fake couple? Shi Fengju could not help but be moved. He secretly took a deep breath. His eyes flashed slightly, and he was no longer as calm as before. Become a fake couple? How could she think of such a thing and say such a thing? Sangwon saw that he did not speak, so she continued, After a year or so, we can divorce peacefully. At that time, we will marry each other and have nothing to do with each other. How about it? Shi Fengju still did not speak, and his heart instinctively felt a little uncomfortable. It was one thing that he did not like her, but it was another thing that she took the initiative to leave him. Men, especially men with such status, talent, and a promising young man like him, had entered the dreams of countless women waiting to be married. Yet, he was rejected by her as soon as she opened her mouth. This person was even the wife that he married into the family with 8 palanquins. It would be strange if he felt comfortable in his heart. He could not help but carefully look at the woman in front of him. Gentle eyebrows, soft facial features, fair skin, big, bright eyes, and especially eye-catching. At this moment, her expression was calm and at ease, neither servile nor overbearing. He could not help but admire her. Thus, he felt even more uncomfortable in his heart. What's wrong? Are you in a hurry to leave the Shi family? Could it be that someone is waiting for you outside? Shi Fengju was angry and blurted out subconsciously. Sangwon was furious. If his words were to spread, her reputation would be ruined. How would she be able to face others in the future? If that's the case, can I still enter the Shi family? Sang-won suppressed the anger in her heart, and the corner of her lips curled into a mocking smile. If the Shi family still wanted to marry her into the Shi family, then the Shi family was not that great. Actually, Shi Fengju regretted his words as soon as he said them. He knew that he blurted them out in a fit of anger. If Sang-won really did something indecent, how could she hide it from the Shi family and his eyes and ears? I'm sorry, I spoke without thinking and was rude. Shi Fengju cupped his hands slightly towards Sang-won and straightforwardly apologized. He had always been an upright gentleman. It was nothing to apologize for saying the wrong thing. You flatter me, it was just an unintentional remark. Sang-won also softened her voice and quickly bowed back. In the Shi family's territory, it was undoubtedly an extremely stupid move to go against Shi Fengju. All right, after a year and a half, we'll divorce. Shi Fengju nodded in agreement. Anyway, the Shi family was not forcing her. The Shi family did not do anything wrong by abiding by the marriage agreement. After a year and a half, they could find a suitable reason to divorce. Everyone would be happy, so why not? A year and a half? So be it. They could not divorce as soon as a new daughter-in-law married into the Shi family. That would be bad for their reputation, and it would cause gossip for no reason. Don't worry, the Shi family will not treat you badly. I guarantee that you will not have to worry about food and clothing for the rest of your life, and you will be rich enough. Shi Fengju generously added. The Shi family was wealthier than the nobles. Seeing that she had taken the initiative, it was not a big deal to give her a generous sum of money. If she wanted to marry in the future, a generous dowry would increase her weight by quite a bit. Thank you, young Master Shi. Sang-won bowed to him again. This time, her gratitude was full of sincerity. Since Shi Fengju had opened his mouth, he would definitely give her a large sum of money. As long as she had money in her hands, her future would be secure. For the next year or so, I hope that young master will keep the fact that we're a fake couple a secret from others. Only the heavens, the earth, you, and I will know about this. Don't tell anyone else, is that all right? Sang-won looked at Shi Fengju, of course. Shi Fengju nodded. If this matter were to be revealed, it would not only be Sang-won who would lose face, but also him and the entire Shi family. Of course, he would not tell anyone. Do you have anything else to say? Shi Fengju saw that Sang-won was hesitating and asked. Sang-won pondered for a moment before saying, I do have a presumptuous request. Miss Gu, since I'm only going to stay in the Shi family for a year or so, is it possible for you to welcome Miss Gu into the family after our separation? Shi Fengju was stunned and looked at Sang-won strangely. Sang-won was also stunned and her face turned red. Embarrassed, she smiled and said, sorry. I was muddle-headed. I said something muddle-headed. The reason why she said that was because she was influenced by her previous life. She did not want Gu Fengzi to marry into the Shi family at this time. Firstly, as the official wife, she would lose face. Secondly, she did not want to waste time fighting with Gu Fengzi. So, it would be best if she did not marry into the Shi family now. But to the current Shi Fengju, since Sang-won had made it clear that she would leave in a year and a half, he would only marry Gu Fengzi after they divorced. He could afford to wait for a year and a half. How could he let Gu Fengzi marry into the Shi family as a concubine now? Shi Fengju looked at her suspiciously. Seeing how embarrassed she was, he did not say anything else. After solving a huge problem, Shi Fengju felt very comfortable. Sleepiness came over him and he raised his hand to cover his mouth and yawned. I'm tired. Rest early. You sleep on the bed. I'll sleep on the couch outside. As he said that, he went to the cupboard to take out a blanket. At least he still had some conscience and did not chase her out to sleep on the floor. But Sang-won rubbed her flat stomach. She was so hungry that her chest was almost sticking to her back. Young master, you should rest first. I'm hungry and want to eat something first. Shi Fengju froze on the spot. His mouth moved and after a while, he said embarrassedly, "Then, please help yourself." In all honesty, he really did not remember this. At the same time, Sang-won sighed in her heart. Why was she so obedient in her previous life? She let him do whatever he wanted with an empty stomach. Chapter 3. The next morning, Sang-won was pushed awake by Shi Fengju. She couldn't be blamed for this. After marrying into the Shi family in her previous life, she was quickly disliked and banished to the cold palace. Her mother-in-law hated her whenever she saw her, so why would she need to greet her? Thus, she had no concept of time. Every day, other than sleeping, eating, daydreaming, and being bored, no one cared about her. Sang-won rubbed her sleepy eyes and looked at Shi Fengju in a daze. The heat from the brocade quilt made her cheeks rosy, and the warm air blew against her face, bringing with it a faint fragrance. "Get up quickly, the servants will be coming in soon." Shi Fengju was flustered and exasperated. He glared at Sang-won with dissatisfaction, but when he saw her expression, his heart couldn't help but flutter. Sang-won cried out, "Ah!" Her whole body quivered, and she hurriedly got up. She grabbed the white bridal veil that she had casually tossed aside and said embarrassedly, This, what should I do?" Shi Fengju rubbed his nose awkwardly and gritted his teeth. Without a word, he turned around and took a sharp ruby hairpin from the dressing table. He made a cut on his middle finger and dripped a drop of blood onto the bridal handkerchief. In an instant, bright red plum blossoms bloomed on the white bridal veil. The red and white were distinct and enchanting. "Enough! Enough!" Sang-won saw him foolishly letting the blood drip and hurriedly snatched the bridal veil. "It's just bleeding, not killing a chicken. What is he trying to do? Dye the cloth?" Shi Fengju's face heated up, and he didn't dare to look at her in the eye. This kind of thing was awkward, really awkward. "You, come down quickly, we have to serve tea and greet mother and uncle and aunt later." Shi Fengju coughed, trying to divert the awkwardness in front of him. He succeeded. Just as he finished speaking, there was a knock on the door and someone calling out, "Young master, young mistress." Both of them secretly heaved a sigh of relief. "Come in." Sang-won glanced at Shi Fengju and replied loudly. The maidservants agreed and entered quietly. They bowed and greeted the two of them. There were those who dressed, those who held towels, and those who prepared hair oil and jewelry. They all performed their duties in an orderly manner. Luya didn't know what to do. Two respectable nannies with glossy hair came forward and put away the bright red bridal veil. When they saw that eldest young master and eldest young mistress couldn't help but pay attention to them, they looked a little nervous. The two nannies only thought that the young couple was nervous because they didn't have much experience. They couldn't help but look at each other with a strange and proud smile. They bowed and congratulated the two together. When the servant girls heard this, they also stopped what they were doing and ran forward to congratulate them. Shi Fengju forced a smile. He glanced at Sang-won, who was also forcing a smile, and said weakly, "Reward." Hearing this, everyone was even more delighted. After freshening up, it was time to go to the main courtyard to offer tea and pay respects to her mother-in-law, Wang. They were going to meet again. Sang-won couldn't help but think of a kindly round face, slender eyes, and thin lips. There was also second uncle Shi Guangyao, second aunt Mi, and her brothers and sisters, as well as her cousin, Gu Fengzi. Walking through the winding corridors and courtyards, Sang-won was in a daze, as if she was in a dream. The feeling of being separated from the world was very real. She should be very familiar with everything in front of her because she was the eldest young mistress of this family. However, she had been living in a corner for a long time. She didn't leave the house and lived in seclusion. Except for the small remote courtyard where she lived, she really wasn't familiar with the other places in the family. She only had a little impression of things from many years ago. In the main hall of the main courtyard, her mother-in-law, Wang, second uncle, and second aunt were already sitting upright. Behind them were several young masters and young mistresses. There were also servant girls and older women serving around them. The whole room was filled with beautiful flowers. Other than the third branch who had gone out to be an official, everyone who should be showing up was here, including Gu Fengzi. After entering, Sang-won subconsciously raised her eyes to look at Gu Fengzi, who was standing behind Wang with her eyes lowered. The pretty begonia red dress embroidered with clivia made her porcelain skin even more outstanding. She slightly pursed her lips, showing the beautiful and soft curve of her lips. Her facial features were soft and sweet, and her eyelashes were long and dense. She was graceful and beautiful, making it easy for people to have a good impression of her. Gu Fengzi also happened to be looking at Sang-won. Their eyes met, and their line of sight met in the air. Gu Fengzi's gentle gaze suddenly rippled slightly. Her eyes brightened, and the corners of her lips curved slightly. She nodded and smiled at Sang-won imperceptibly. Sang-won shivered and immediately lowered her eyes. In her previous life, Gu Fengzi's friendliness and smile made her nervous heart relax for no reason. At this moment, besides being nervous, she also felt cold all over. Mother, second uncle, second aunt. The two stood still. Shi Fengju bowed to the three elders and greeted them. Sang-won's hands were slightly crossed in front of her. She gently stood beside Shi Fengju. You're here. Wang smiled kindly and asked a few questions. Second Lord Shi and Mi Shi also smiled and exchanged a few words. Then, Wang looked at Sang-won and said with a smile, "Okay, let's begin." A servant girl carried a brocade mat and gently placed it in front of Wang. Then, another servant came forward with a tray. On the tray was a pea-green tea cup with the word, "Double Happiness," painted in gold. Steam rose in spirals, and the fragrance of the tea spread faintly. Sang-won's hands clenched for no reason. She stiffly walked over and looked at the teacup. Her heart suddenly turned cold. It was exactly the same as the situation in her previous life. The light yellow-green tea was clear and bright. The closer she got to the tea, the more fragrant it was. She could tell at a glance that it was the best tea. However, in the tea, there was a strand of hair that was about the length of a finger. In her previous life, she was already nervous enough. How could she dare to take a closer look? She immediately served the tea. As a result, her mother-in-law, Wang, was unhappy. Although she did not reprimand her, her face was very ugly and her brows were furrowed. Then, it was Gu Fengzi who smiled and helped her out. Although the hair in the tea was not put in by her, the teacup was handed over by her. She did not notice anything wrong and handed it over. It could be seen that she was a careless person who did not disrespect her mother-in-law. So, how could her mother-in-law like her? How could she be worthy of being the young mistress of the Shi household? Because of this, her mother-in-law and husband did not have a good impression of her. The servants in the household also secretly despised her. However, she remembered Gu Fengzi's good points. Ahem. Shi Fengju saw that she was in a daze and coughed to remind her. Sang-won suddenly regained her senses and smiled apologetically at him. She reached out both hands to take the teacup, but the moment her hands touched it, she immediately retreated. This tea seems to be a little cold. Drinking herbal tea in the morning is not good for the body. Let's change it. Sang-won's gaze turned slightly and glanced at Wang. She smiled as if to explain to her, but she directly gave the order to the servant holding the tray. She was a newly married daughter-in-law and was considered a delicate person. Wang naturally would not embarrass her in front of everyone. Seeing that her daughter-in-law was concerned about her health, she was even happier. Although she only drank 1 or 2 mouthfuls of the tea, it was good that her daughter-in-law was so considerate. Wang Shi smiled and pursed her lips at the maid. The servant could only bow and retreat. Another person had already heard it and served it again. Sang-won held the teacup with both hands and went forward to kneel in front of Wang. She raised the teacup over her head and said, "Mother, please have some tea." "Good, good." Wang Shi smiled and leaned forward to receive it. She smiled and drank 2 mouthfuls before handing a palm-sized red lacquer box to Sang-won. With a smile, she said, "From today onwards, we'll be a family. You're a good girl from a scholarly family. You've studied and are knowledgeable, so there's no need for this old woman to nag at you. From now on, live well and give birth to more children for our Shi family." "Yes, mother. Daughter-in-law will remember mother's words." Sang-won hurriedly agreed and kowtowed to Wang before getting up. "Good, good." Wang was happy to see her daughter-in-law being obedient. She smiled until her eyes were curved. Sang-won saw this and secretly heaved a sigh of relief. She then served tea to second uncle and second aunt. In her previous life, she was afraid that she would be rude and replied, "Daughter-in-law has been taught by the court since young. I will not dare to forget." Seeing her mother-in-law's puzzled face turn cold, she regretted it too late. A scholarly family. Sang-won couldn't help but smile bitterly. Their Sang family was indeed a scholarly family. Only, when this phrase was used in a wealthy family, it was elegant and noble, inspiring respect. But when it was used in a down-and-out family like the Sang family, it was more like sarcasm. Back then, old Master Shi had taken a liking to her father's knowledge and was impressed by his knowledge. Thus, he decided on this marriage. However, her father was full of knowledge, but his path to the imperial examinations was never smooth. After becoming a county official, he did not achieve anything. Old Master Shi was depressed and passed away. Her father spent a lot of money on the imperial examinations, and the Sang family declined again and again. Now, her eldest brother and second brother had also become county officials. As for the future, Sang-won didn't dare to think about it. Second Lord Shi was obsessed with taking care of the goldfish, parrots, thrushes, orioles, and other birds. Every day, he would take care of his treasures as if they were his ancestors. Although he was sitting and receiving the kowtows from his new niece-in-law, he was already thinking about how he should quickly go back to feed the fish, change the water, and bathe the thrushes. He didn't notice Sang-won. When he saw the teacup handed to him, he took it and said, "End," twice. After drinking the tea and handing over the red packet, he couldn't help but shift his body. He couldn't sit still and kept glancing at Mi-shi, hinting for her to hurry up. When it was Mi-shi's turn, she took a sip of the tea before wiping the corner of her mouth with a handkerchief. After handing over the gift, she glanced at Gu Fengzi and said to Sang-won with a smile, "My niece-in-law is such a talent. Big sister-in-law, just look at her. She's beautiful on the outside and smart on the inside. I'm so envious. Sister-in-law will be blessed in the future. Niece-in-law, you're educated and knowledgeable. You'll definitely be able to learn anything quickly. You'll be able to share sister-in-law's and Dolong's burdens early. Miss Gu can also take a break. Sister-in-law, don't you think so? Although Miss Gu is capable, she's still an outsider. Although she's lived in our household for many years, she's still a guest." After saying that, Mi-shi covered her mouth and giggled. Her eyes inadvertently swept across Shi Fengju and Gu Fengzi's faces as if she was pulling an invisible string, connecting the two of them together and telling Sang-won what she meant. Chapter 4. Upon hearing that, Wang immediately looked at Sang-won. She saw that Sang-won was looking down and smiling humbly at Mi-shi. There was no surprise, doubt, or anger on her face. She was calm and polite, as if she wasn't thinking about anything that she shouldn't be thinking about. Wang Fengzi couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. She glared at Mi-shi and rolled her eyes. She wanted to rebuke Mi-shi. However, she had never quarreled with anyone. Although she was extremely angry, the anger lingered in her chest and throat. She just couldn't turn it into a sharp weapon to counterattack. In the end, she could only let out a low snort and let it go. Gu Fengzi smiled at Mi-shi and said softly, "My new cousin-in-law is naturally good, but second aunt, you don't have to be envious of aunt. You're also very lucky. Otherwise, how could you marry such a good daughter-in-law?" The second cousin-in-law that Gu Fengzi was talking about was the son of second Lord Shi and Mi-shi, Shi Fengming. 2 years ago, Shi Fengming was infatuated with a prostitute, Su Qing from Drunken Fragrance Brothel and insisted on marrying her. This bolt from the blue angered second Lord Shi and Mi-shi to death. The mother and son quarreled until there was no peace in the family. Mi She believed that her son had been bewitched by a vixen. She felt that as long as he married a wife, he would naturally forget about the prostitute. Therefore, she hurriedly arranged a marriage for She Fengming. The second young mistress of the She family married before the first young mistress. Unexpectedly, the young and impetuous She Fengming fell in love with her. His mother threatened him with Su Qing's life and threatened to kill him. He had no choice but to marry her and enter the bridal chamber. Not long after, he seized the opportunity to elope with the beauty with the money. He left behind the newly married second young mistress, Zhou Jingyi, and still hadn't returned. This matter was the most painful scar in Mi She's heart. Gu Fengzi's words were harsh. Sure enough, Mi She's face turned snow-white. Her aura changed and her hair stood on end. She glared at Gu Fengzi and said, "What did you say? Say it again." As soon as Gu Fengzi finished speaking, Wang felt a little guilty after a moment of satisfaction. She was about to scold Gu Fengzi for trying to smooth things over when she saw Mi She being so overbearing. She couldn't help but feel angry. Instead, she protected Gu Fengzi and snorted coldly, "What did you say?" What Fengzi said was the truth. Jingyi was such a good child. How could she not be a good daughter-in-law? Who are you trying to impress? Sister-in-law, you. Old master, you see. Mi She thought of her son who was wandering outside and her eyes immediately became wet. She became angry out of humiliation and spoke in a choked voice. She Fengju frowned. He didn't expect things to turn out this way. Just as he was about to speak, Gu Fengzi smiled and said softly, "It's all my fault. My mouth is really stupid. Even good words can be so unpleasant to the ears. Second aunt is the one who thinks too much. I deserve it, I really deserve it. Second aunt, I'm sorry, but please be magnanimous and let me off this time. Let's not look at anything else, but on account of my new cousin-in-law's wedding day, please let me off. I'll apologize to you here. Cousin Sang-won, don't you think so?" As she spoke, she bowed deeply towards Mi She. Sang-won was speechless. Gu Fengzi actually dragged her into the water. Gu Fengzi threw out such words. How was she supposed to respond? If she followed Gu Fengzi's wishes, she would think too highly of herself and refute her mother-in-law's words. If she didn't follow her wishes, she would clearly say that Mi She was in the wrong. That would be contradicting her elders. No matter what, she wouldn't be able to gain anything. Sang-won smiled bitterly. In her previous life, she was really blinded by lard. How could she have thought that Gu Fengzi was a good person? Would a good person say such words? Sang-won hesitantly looked at She Fengju. She was a new daughter-in-law, so it was reasonable for her to be ignorant of the current affairs of the She family. It was normal for her to ask her husband for help. Seeing her pleading gaze, She Fengju could not ignore it. He sighed softly and said to Mi She, "Second aunt, don't worry. Second brother will be safe and sound. I will definitely bring him back safely to you." These words seemed to come out of nowhere, but it was the best way to comfort Mi She. "Remember what you said. Dalang, second aunt is counting on you." Mi She didn't even look at Gu Fengzi. She looked at She Fengju with tears in her eyes. Sure enough, all her attention was on him. Second Lord She saw that she was obviously just opening her mouth to drink a mouthful of water, yet she was rambling and looking for trouble, wasting his time. He was already half angry. When he heard her mention his useless son, his anger immediately turned into anger. He snorted and said, "Why are you looking for him? Don't look for him. I'd like to see how long he can stay outside. If he has the ability, I'll give in to him if he doesn't come back for the rest of his life. What a disloyal and unfilial thing. I've raised him for nothing. How can you say that? How can you say that?" Mi She trembled with anger and said hatefully, "Second brother is also my son. Why can't you look for him? Yes, you're not worried. You have another son, so of course you're not worried about him. I know how much you hate the two of us. You heartless person. Forget it, forget it. What nonsense are you talking about? What do you mean in front of so many people? I really have nothing to say to you. Second Lord Shi suddenly stood up and cursed under his breath. What a disgrace. He hurriedly greeted Wang and left. Misha flew into a rage out of humiliation. She also stood up and chased after him. She complained and argued with him all the way. The whole room was silent. All right, let's all go. Dalong, take your wife back. Wan Yang, you must be tired from yesterday. Go back and rest. I'll send someone to call you for dinner. Wang tiredly said to her son and daughter-in-law as she patted her shoulder with her fist. Yes, mother. Sangwon bowed and looked at Shi Fengju earnestly. In her previous life, there was no such thing as the second branch. However, because of the tea offering incident, her mother-in-law and husband were unhappy. Shi Fengju said that he had something to do and left. She went back to Ning Garden in embarrassment under the strange gazes of the maids and women. Then she hid and cried secretly. In this life, she didn't want to be shrouded under such gazes again. That feeling of sitting on pins and needles, as if there was a sharp blade on her back, once was enough. Shi Fengju subconsciously glanced at Gu Fengzi and quickly withdrew his gaze. He nodded and left with Sangwon. As soon as they left the main courtyard, Shi Fengju slowed down his footsteps. Dalong. Sangwon didn't wait for him to finish his words and called him softly. She looked at him with a timid and pitiful gaze. The meaning of her unfinished words was obvious. She wanted him to send her back to Ning Garden. Shi Fengju was startled and didn't want to continue his unfinished words. He sighed silently and raised his hand. Let's go. Let's go back. Sangwon nodded her head and let out a sigh of relief. She knew what Shi Fengju wanted to do. Others might not have noticed when he and Gu Fengzi looked at each other before parting, but Sangwon saw it clearly. He must be in a hurry to find Gu Fengzi and have a private talk. She had no right to interfere with their love. She didn't have the ability to interfere. But if Shi Fengju left her behind and left, where would she put her face as a new daughter-in-law? She wouldn't be able to live in this manner anymore. Wasn't that the case in her previous life? The two of them went back to Ning Garden one after the other. Shi Fengju's steps were a little fast. His robe fluttered and rustled. He was absent-minded and anxious. Sangwon silently followed behind him. She didn't know what to feel as she watched her nominal husband care so much about another woman. But, compared to her previous life, it was much better. Sangwon chatted casually. She turned her eyes and saw the faint mockery on the face of the servant girl following her. Sangwon shivered and twisted her foot. Ouch! What's wrong? Shi Fengju, who was walking in front, finally stopped. He turned around and reached out to help her. His hand paused in the air for 2 seconds before he finally reached out to support her arm. Did you twist it? It's nothing. I just didn't pay attention and tripped on a pebble. It's nothing. Sangwon smiled apologetically. Chapter 5. For example, at this moment, if it was Gu Fengzi who asked the question, there would already be servants rushing to fawn over her to answer. Xing Ji naturally would not fight for this kind of opportunity to show her face. But at this moment, it was Sangwon who asked the question, and no one answered. As the head servant, Xing Ji naturally had to answer. Her answer was very simple. Who was Mama Li? Where did she go? Sangwon did not ask, so she did not answer. Mama Li. Sangwon knew who it was, but deliberately asked in confusion. Her gentle and clear eyes looked towards Xing Ji, indicating for her to answer. Xing Ji could only explain, Mama Li is the eldest young master's wet nurse. She has always been in charge of Ning Garden. A few days ago, her waist and legs hurt, so she went home to rest. I'm afraid she won't be back for a few days. I see. Sangwon smiled and nodded. Then she smiled and said, Before Mama Li left, did she discuss with the eldest young master who will be in charge of these days? Xing Ji said, Young mistress, if you have any instructions, please let this servant know. This servant is called Xing Ji. Good, then I'll have to trouble you. Sangwon smiled and thought for a moment before saying, I'll go in and rest for a while. Call me when it's time for lunch. After lunch, I want to see the servants of Ning Garden. It's nothing, I just think they look familiar. Yes. Jida slightly bent her knees and agreed. She subconsciously raised her head to take a quick glance at Sangwon. Deep down, she was a little surprised. She did not expect this new young mistress to be so generous despite her poor family background. She was, after all, the daughter of a scholar. Young mistress, please rest. This servant will give the order later. Xing Ji thought in her heart and could not help but take the initiative to add a sentence. Then she ordered the servant girls to bring water to wash Sangwon's face. The servant girls were all used to serving people, so they immediately acted in an orderly manner. One of them took a large towel to cover the front of Sangwon's clothes. Another gently rolled up her sleeves. Another held a diamond-shaped copper basin and knelt in front of her. Another servant first washed her hands in the basin held by another servant girl. Then she took a clean soft towel from the red lacquer tray held by another servant girl and soaked it in warm water. She gently wrung it until it was half dry and carefully handed it to Sangwon. There were also things like scapes and ointment for her to wash her face. After washing her face, she took off her hair and changed her clothes. After a while, Sangwon lay down on the chaise long couch. Luya was the only one left to serve her. The rest of the servants left. The room quieted down all of a sudden. In front of the moon-shaped window, separated by the red gauze curtain of the golden begonia, on the long table with curly grasses, there was a three-legged purple copper incense burner with a bird's head button. Light smoke was rising in spirals, filling the room with a sweet fragrance. Fresh flowers, precious vases, fine porcelain, gold and jade. The furnishings in the room were all exquisite and expensive. The wealth of the Shi family was something that the Sang family could never catch up with even if they were to rush for 10 years. Now that there was no one in the house, the feeling of uneasiness gradually disappeared. Luya regained her curious nature and couldn't help but open her eyes to look around the house. The constantly changing expression in her eyes was enough to show how deeply shocked she was. She could not help but exclaim in admiration. Young mistress, oh no, young mistress, the Shi family is really rich. These things must be worth a lot, right? Luya said softly as she stared at a nearly 2 feet tall Fengwu peony on the antique shelf opposite her. Her eyes lit up. Sangwon smiled and squinted her eyes. How do you know that these things are worth a lot? Luya made a sound of surprise and said, Just one look and you can tell that they are expensive. How can such beautiful things not be worth a lot? Young mistress, are they worth a lot? Sangwon saw her glowing eyes staring at her for a definite answer. She could not help but laugh and nodded. Yes, they are indeed worth a lot. Then, how much are they worth? Luya's eyes lit up and became even more interested. How many eggs do we have to sell to get one? 200, no, 300, 400. Sangwon held back her laughter. Her eyes swept across the room and pointed at the incense burner with spirals of smoke. That is worth at least a few dozen cows. I'm afraid the rest is even more. I don't know how many eggs it is worth. Ah, so many. Luya widened her eyes and mouth in shock. Seeing that her young mistress did not seem to be joking, she subconsciously twisted her hands and stammered. This, even if you sell this servant, it won't be enough to buy one. Young mistress, this servant will. The light in Luya's eyes suddenly dimmed and she lowered her head in dejection. These things were worth more than her. If she accidentally damaged one or two, she would not be able to pay for it even if she sold herself. She came from a poor family of hunters and had many siblings. Her parents had no choice but to sell her cheaply and she came to Sangwon's side. Although her days with Sangwon were not filled with riches, she was still able to earn a bowl of rice. She had never been abused, beaten, or scolded before. Thinking of the possibility of being betrayed by her mistress if she did something wrong, Luya felt as if the sky was falling down. She wanted to say that she would serve her young mistress well and not do anything wrong. However, the Shi family was too different from the Sang family. From this morning until just now, the servants had been helping her young mistress wash her face and comb her hair. She had not been able to help at all. It was not that she was lazy, but that she did not know how to do anything. There were many things that she had never seen before, and even if she saw them, she would not know what they were used for. The uneasiness hidden in the bottom of her heart suddenly surged up and attacked her little heart. There were many servants in the Shi family, and all of them were smarter and more capable than her. Young mistress had plenty of servants to serve her, so why would she still want her? Lu Ya's face turned pale and she could not help but shudder. With a plop, she knelt down. Young mistress! Young mistress! This servant will learn it. This servant will learn it with all her heart. This servant will learn everything. Young mistress, please don't sell this servant. This servant is willing to serve young mistress for the rest of my life. This servant is not willing to leave young mistress. Lu Ya kowtowed with tears in her eyes. Lu Ya, quickly get up. Sangwon sat up and reached out to help Lu Ya. Thinking of her previous life, she could not help but feel sad. Lu Ya, don't be afraid, don't be afraid. I will not sell you. Even if others want to sell you, I will protect you as long as you are obedient. I'll listen to everything young mistress says. Lu Ya nodded like a chicken pecking at rice and promised. She then asked pitifully, Really? Of course it's true. Sangwon sighed softly. In this household, only the two of us are family. In the future, I'm afraid we will have to rely on each other. You have an impulsive personality and like to quarrel with others. You can't do that in the future. Change. I will definitely change. Even if others hit me or scold me, I will not talk back. Hearing that Sangwon still had a request for her, Lu Ya's heart calmed down by a little. And also, you just have to serve me. When I'm not around, you have to do needlework for me in the room. Who told you to do anything without my permission? Of course, except for young master, Mama Li, and Xing Ji. Yes. I will remember it. Do more and speak less, especially about our family. Don't tell others. If you hear others say things you shouldn't hear, don't listen, and don't ask about things you shouldn't ask. I'll save it. Don't try to be brave. If you don't know, ask others. Don't feel embarrassed. Our Sang family is a small family and there are many things we don't know. Even if others say it, it doesn't matter. Yes. You also have to learn etiquette. After all, this is the Shi family, not our Sang family. Yes. You have to be polite to others, especially Mama Li and Xing Ji. If you offend them, although they won't sell you, you won't be able to avoid physical pain. When that time comes, I won't be able to speak up for you and you can only suffer for nothing. Yes, young mistress. This servant, will remember it. This servant will definitely not embarrass young mistress or cause trouble. Lu Ya's expression turned serious as she promised. Sangwon smiled and reached out to help her up. Why are you still kneeling? Quickly get up. Young mistress. Lu Ya wiped her eyes and stood up with a smile on her face. Sangwon looked at her and smiled. Her gaze lightly swept across the exquisitely decorated room. Are you afraid? Lu Ya thought for a moment and nodded lightly, softly saying, A little, I feel a little nervous. Sangwon nodded slightly. A country bumpkin entering a city was already a little uneasy, not to mention suddenly falling into the house of the richest family in Qingzhou. Wasn't she the same in her previous life? The more afraid she was, the more she was despised and looked down upon. So what if she was the mistress? In the end, everyone bullied and humiliated her. Step by step, she stepped into a hopeless situation and withered pitifully in an abandoned corner. In this life, she would never have such a fate again. Don't be afraid, slowly learn. Who doesn't have 3 heads and 6 arms and want to eat people? What are you afraid of? Sangwon pinched her wrist and smiled encouragingly. Young mistress is right. At most, I'll be laughed at a few times. Luya saw that her heart was assured and smiled, her eyes sparkling. The master and servant's eyes met and they both secretly made up their minds. Shi Fengju left Ning Garden and hurried to the study room. Pushing the door open, he saw Gu Fengzi standing in front of the big desk, flipping through the account books. That weak yet strong figure made his heart soften and pity her. Eldest cousin. Gu Fengzi's eyes lit up, but immediately calmed down. The sudden brilliance on her face also disappeared. She put down the account books and looked at Shi Fengju with a forced smile. Shi Fengju couldn't help but step forward and embrace her. He gently patted her back and his tongue seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds. He didn't know what to say. Gu Fengzi didn't say anything. She gently nestled in his arms and gently wrapped her arms around his waist. Cousin-in-law, she's a good person. She's gentle and kind to people. She's also dignified and beautiful. There's no need to talk about her temperament. After all, she's the daughter of a scholar. She's well-educated and well-mannered. She's not like us, who stinks of money and is just a commoner. After a moment, Gu Fengzi gently broke free from Shi Fengju's embrace and said softly with a forced smile. Shi Fengju saw that she was obviously jealous but pretended to be magnanimous and said such words. Her angry and resentful face was more attractive than usual. He couldn't help but love and pity her. He raised his eyebrows and said with a faint smile, "Oh? So that's what you think? Really?" As he spoke, he raised his head and rubbed his chin as if he was thinking. He nodded and said seriously, "Oh, after hearing what you said, it seems to be true." Chapter 6. You. Gu Fengzi did not expect him to say that. She knew that he was just teasing her, but she still felt an indescribable bitterness in her heart. She felt uncomfortable and wronged, so she turned around and stomped her feet. "Why are you crying?" Shi Fengju had always liked to tease her, but he did not expect her to be so easily teased this time. She cried with just one sentence, so he panicked and quickly coaxed her. Don't cry, don't cry. I was just teasing you, so don't take it seriously. Why are you crying? My good Fong, you know that I don't know how to coax people, so don't make things difficult for me. Be good, Don't cry, don't cry. Gu Fengzi snorted. She turned around and lowered her head, refusing to turn around. After he coaxed her for a while, she said, "How can you joke about such things? You clearly know that how can you use such words to tease me?" Shi Fengju saw that she was better and smiled. "You're still blaming me? Wasn't it you who started it? Why don't you tell me if your words are pleasant to my ears?" Gu Fengzi was at a loss for words. She glared at him coquettishly before smirking. "You only know how to make me angry and bully me. I'm so stupid. I willingly let you bully me." She became shy as she spoke. Her voice also softened slightly. The bashfulness of a young girl was very moving. Shi Fengju's heart felt warm and soft. He sighed softly and said, "In the future, don't say such silly things again. Fong, I won't let you down." Gu Fengzi's heart was filled with sweetness, but she could not help but feel sour and dissatisfied. "You won't let me down? You won't let me down? Didn't you still marry Sang Wan into the family? If you really won't let me down, why didn't you cancel this marriage? As for whether Sang Wan's reputation will be affected or what will happen to the Sang family, what does it have to do with you? What does it have to do with the Shi family?" Gu Fengzi thought so in her heart, but on the surface, she smiled sweetly. She lowered her head and softly replied with an N. She raised her eyes and gazed at Shi Fengju affectionately. "Big cousin, I'm satisfied with your words. I'm an honest person. I'll remember these words for the rest of my life." "Yes, for a lifetime." Shi Fengju smiled and nodded heavily. Gu Fengzi's eyes that were fixed on him suddenly flashed. Light flowed and her expression was overflowing. However, there was a hint of doubt and confusion in her eyes. Shi Fengju didn't say anything. He just raised his eyebrows at her, looking equally puzzled. Was there anything that couldn't be said between them? If she wanted to ask something, she could just ask directly. Why would she hesitate? Actually, Big Cousin is really a good person. Gu Fengzi understood what he meant. She slowly opened her mouth and said, Big Cousin, you're actually a little happy in your heart, right? What are you saying? Shi Fengju was shocked. Why would you think that? He only had her in his heart. All these years, he only thought of her and missed her. He had never had any other woman. How could she say that? All right. Just take it that I said something wrong. Gu Fengzi saw that his expression was slightly cold. He was obviously angry. She couldn't help but feel a little regretful. She secretly regretted that she had been too rash and thought too much. She kept apologizing. However, there was still a shadow of doubt in her heart. They had grown up together. She understood Shi Fengju too well. After the wedding date was set, especially a few days before the wedding, Shi Fengju's expression was very ugly. His expression was unusually cold. However, today, that expression had completely disappeared. The calmness in his eyes made her very uneasy. There was a faint feeling of panic that she couldn't grasp. Since this marriage was set by the elders who had passed away, Sangwon entering the family was a foregone conclusion. Gu Fengzi had already accepted this fact. However, she wasn't worried or afraid. Shi Fengju wasn't a heartless person. Their relationship of so many years wouldn't change just because of Sangwon's arrival. Even if this Sangwon was a beautiful fairy, it wouldn't change. Even if she entered the family, even if they became husband and wife, so what? The war had just begun. Until the end, who could say that she had lost? But now, it seemed that she had been too careless. Don't let your imagination run wild in the future. Shi Fengju sighed and glared at her. Isn't it because I care about you? Gu Fengzi pouted and acted coquettishly. You really won't be moved by her, won't you like her? I won't. Shi Fengju answered resolutely. Gu Fengzi's heart suddenly flew up again. Then do you have anything to say to me? Shi Fengju was startled. Looking at the beautiful woman whose watery eyes were filled with anticipation, he subconsciously wanted to tell Gu Fengzi about his promise with Sangwon. With great difficulty, he restrained himself. It wasn't that he didn't trust Gu Fengzi, but he had always been sure that there was no such thing as an impenetrable wall in the world. Since it was a secret, the fewer people who knew, the better. Anyway, a year and a half would pass very quickly. A little more time wouldn't make much of a difference. It wouldn't be bad to give her a surprise in the future. Thinking of this, Shi Fengju resisted the urge to say it. Staring at Gu Fengzi, he smiled gently and said, I'll say it again. I won't let you down. Although Gu Fengzi was a little disappointed, she was still happy in her heart. She nodded heavily and smiled like a flower. The two of them talked about their feelings for a while. Gu Fengzi said half seriously and half jokingly, Then, my cousin-in-law is a new daughter-in-law. Do you want to go back and accompany her? Her hesitant tone showed her reluctance. Her gentle words showed her generosity and understanding of the big picture. She just wanted him to see her good side. No need. Shi Fengju shook his head and said without thinking. He and she were not a real husband and wife. Both of them were well aware of this. Presumably, she wouldn't want him to hang around her, right? Gu Fengzi was naturally happy to hear his answer, but she still had to put on a show. Her delicate brows furrowed slightly, and she said softly, This isn't very good, is it? After all, my cousin-in-law has just married into the family. The servants are used to worshipping the powerful and stepping on the weak. Wouldn't this be? Shi Fengju was stunned for a moment before he suddenly had an epiphany. Yes, she still had to live in the manor for a year or so. It was not a long time, but it was not short either. If he neglected her as soon as she married into the family, she did not have any family background to rely on. How could she have a good life in the future? Shi Fengju couldn't help but think of that gentle and quiet face with a trace of helplessness. He thought of her pleading, "Dalong," when they came out of his mother's room. He thought of her crying out, "Ouch!" and how she wanted to say something but stopped. He thought of the words she said before him when they entered Ning Garden. Shi Fengju suddenly understood. She had also thought of this problem, but it was inconvenient for her to say it to him. Since he saw his cousin's eyes in the main hall, how could he think of anything else? He actually ignored it. An indescribable complex feeling rose in his heart. Shi Fengju felt a little apologetic. She was so sensible and took the initiative to solve the big problem that had troubled him for many years. Just based on this, he could not refuse her favor. She was well aware of what it meant to give up the position of the Shi family's young mistress, but she still did it. While Shi Fengju felt apologetic, he couldn't help but feel a little vexed. If he had known that she had such intentions, he would have forcefully asked his mother to agree to cancel the marriage. It would have saved him the trouble he was in now. However, Shi Fengju shook his head and sighed. Grandfather's will was passed down to his parents. Before his father passed away, he cautiously told his mother again. With his mother's temperament, she would never agree. "Eldest cousin, what's wrong?" Gu Fengzi saw his expression become complicated after hearing her words. His expression changed again and again. She couldn't help but feel regretful. All right, why did she have to ask so much? She had lifted a rock and smashed her own foot. "It's nothing. I still have some account books to go through. Go to mother's place and chat with her. See if she needs any help with anything." Shi Fengju smiled. After the wedding, there were more or less things that needed to be done in the Fu. Then I'll go first. Gu Fengzi nodded. Before she left, she said, "It's almost noon. Don't be so busy that you forget to eat." Go ahead." Shi Fengju nodded and smiled. Gu Fengzi could only turn and leave. She felt a little disappointed. If it was in the past, he would have asked her to stay for lunch and then the two of them would go to her aunt's place to chat. Just as Gu Fengzi left, Shi Fengju pondered for a moment before calling the servant Chong Huan. "Go to Ning Garden and tell this prince to go back for lunch." Chong Huan froze in surprise and looked at him. When he met his angry eyes, he was so scared that he hurriedly looked away. Yes. After leaving the study, Gu Fengzi took the servant girl Lan Xiang and walked slowly through the garden. As she walked, she thought about something. Suddenly, she turned and walked towards Ning Garden. "Young miss." Lan Xiang's face paled. She looked nervous and excited. Young miss wanted to go to Ning Garden. Was she going to show off to eldest young mistress? After all, eldest young mistress had the status of being the legal wife. Was it appropriate for young miss to go there? Would she be at a disadvantage? Her young miss was protected by eldest young mistress and eldest young master. Even the young masters and young misses in the Fu had to be courteous to her. She wouldn't be at a disadvantage, right? Eldest cousin-in-law is coming. As her cousin, I have to go and greet her. Gu Fengzi hooked her lips and a proud smile appeared on her charming face. Sangwan chatted with Luya for a while before she lay down with her clothes on. Not long after, Xingji came in and calmly told her that eldest young master was coming back for lunch. Sangwan was a bit surprised. However, since her husband said so, she naturally had to respond. She couldn't just lie down carelessly. Sangwan gently smiled and stood up. She ordered Xingji, "Since that's the case, tell the kitchen to make a few more dishes that eldest young master likes to eat. There's no need to rush to serve them. Let's wait for eldest young master to come before serving them." Xingji responded appropriately. She glanced at Sangwan and said, "This servant will ask someone to help eldest young mistress brush her hair and wash her face." "That's good too." Sangwan smiled and nodded. She forcefully stopped herself from saying, "Thank you for your hard work." If she were to say those words to the servants, not only would they not appreciate her kindness, they would also look down on her. In the future, it would be difficult for her to show off her identity as a master in front of them. This was the strict Shi family, not Willow Town where the Sang family lived. Chapter 7. Young Mistress. Xingji went out to call for her. Luya happily called out to Sang-won. She rubbed her hands excitedly and lowered her voice to show her determination. Young mistress, don't worry. This servant will learn diligently. Sang-won smiled gently. No need to rush. Take your time. She had just finished dressing up when she heard a servant rush in and report, Young mistress, Miss Gu is here. There was an indescribable excitement in her voice. When the other servants heard it, they all secretly looked at Sang-won. It turned out that they were all waiting to see a good show. Is it Cousin May? Quickly invite her in. Sang-won sneered inwardly, but on the surface, she acted as if nothing had happened. It was as if the person who came was just her cousin. In fact, in her eyes, wasn't it? Cousin-in-law. Congratulations, cousin-in-law. Before she finished speaking, Gu Fengzi had already brought Lan Xiang in. Her hands were crossed on the left side of her waist. She gracefully curtsied to Sang-won and smiled. I came uninvited. I hope cousin-in-law won't dislike me. Of course not. Cousin May, don't be so courteous. Sang-won smiled and personally supported her. She led her in and the two sat down. She ordered the servants to serve tea and smiled. I wanted someone to talk to me. What a coincidence that Cousin May is here. I'm not good with words and my knowledge is shallow. I hope Cousin May won't dislike me for being boring. Don't mention it. Cousin-in-law is too polite. Gu Fengzi giggled and the two looked at each other. After drinking the tea, Gu Fengzi carefully looked at Sang-won and said with concern, Cousin-in-law's complexion doesn't look too good. Is it because you're too tired and didn't rest well? A woman's health is the most important. She can't lose anything but her own body. Cousin-in-law, you don't have to worry too much. When it's time to rest, you should rest well. His aunt was a very nice person. She was very kind to people and would never pick on anyone. As time goes by, you will know. Hearing Gu Fengzi's soft and gentle voice full of concern, Sang-won felt a sense of absent-mindedness. It was the same in her previous life. She was as passionate as a basin of fire and treated her with all her heart. She treated her much better than Shi Fengju. As for her mother-in-law's likes and dislikes, it was through her mouth that she told her. In the end, she did as she was told, but her mother-in-law hated her more and more. Sang-won wanted to laugh as she thought about it, but she admired Gu Fengzi even more. She was really a very smart person. She was able to play small tricks with ease. She had been led by the nose and cheated so miserably, but every time, she was able to find a way to clean herself up completely. She didn't do anything wrong. Everything was Sang-won's fault. Thank you for your concern. That's right, where did cousin come from? Sang-won asked with a smile. Gu Fengzi was a little surprised that Sang-won didn't take the opportunity to ask about her aunt. She was her mother-in-law, and her mother-in-law's attitude directly determined her position in the manor. Did she not care at all? Or was it that she was already prepared? I just came from the garden. The weather is pretty good, so I was thinking of picking a few early blooming flowers for my aunt to put in a vase. After walking around for a while, I didn't see many good flowers. I just happened to pass by Ning Garden, so I came to see my cousin-in-law. Gu Fengzi smiled warmly. Is that so? Sang-won's eyes lit up. She followed along and asked with a smile, so mother-in-law likes fresh flowers. What kind of flowers do you like the most? Gu Fengzi saw that she understood and was secretly happy. She smiled and chatted with her for a while. She smiled and said that she would come see her tomorrow before she left. Sang-won naturally agreed and personally sent her out with a smile. She turned a blind eye to the various gazes that the maidservants cast at her. She actually hoped that one of them would be bold enough to mock and ridicule her in front of her. That way, she wouldn't have to find an excuse to punish them. Whether she was good or not was her own business. She believed that Wang and Shi Fengju wouldn't want to see the servants in the manor climb over their masters' heads without any rules. At lunchtime, Shi Fengju came as expected. The timing was very accurate. It was right in front of the manor's lunchtime. The food was brought in from the kitchen and didn't need to be kept warm. It was directly placed on the table. I just took care of something in the study. Shi Fengju coughed and said lightly. Sang-won was stunned for a moment. Was he trying to explain to her why he left the house in a hurry? However, she certainly wouldn't refuse his kindness. More importantly, it was good that the servants heard it. Sang-won nodded her head gently and said, "Thank you for your hard work, De Lang. For lunch, I specially ordered the kitchen to make a few dishes that you like. Eat more." Shi Fengju saw her smile gently and elegantly. It was as if they were really family. The awkwardness in his heart gradually disappeared. That's right. Why was he being awkward? They had already talked things out last night. What was wrong with being honest with each other? Let's eat. Shi Fengju smiled and swept his gaze across the table. The 8 dishes and 1 soup were all his favorites. He said, "You don't have to be like this in the future. Just ask the kitchen to make whatever you like. You don't have to just take care of me." Sang-won smiled and sat down. "I don't have any special preferences. Our Sang family can't afford to pay attention to them." Shi Fengju was stunned. He smiled and didn't say anything else. Of course, he knew about the Sang family's situation. He didn't expect Sang-won to say these words so openly in front of him. She didn't seem embarrassed in the slightest. This made him secretly admire her. After all, even a man wouldn't say these words easily. It was rare for someone like her to have such a temperament. After the two of them had lunch, Shi Fengju ordered Xing Ji to call all the servants in Ning Garden Inn to greet the young mistress. In the future, this would be her place to live. He couldn't let her live like this and let others look down on her. Sang-won was very surprised. She didn't know what had happened to Shi Fengju when he went out. He actually changed his temperament and took the initiative to think for her. Of course, she was very happy. After Shi Fengju expressed his attitude, all the servants in Ning Garden immediately treated Sang-won with more respect. Many of them were nervous because of their previous rudeness. They were worried that the new young mistress would hold a grudge and make things difficult for them. They became even more attentive and careful. Sang-won ordered Luya to take out the gifts she had prepared. They were different colored pouches embroidered with various auspicious patterns and tassels. The pouches were filled with scattered silvers. The Sang family was barely enough to eat and wear, so Sang-won's gifts were naturally not generous. The silvers in the pouches were at most 2 chien and at least 2 fun. In the eyes of the servants in the Shi family, this was really nothing. In her previous life, because of this, she bore the reputation of being stingy and unkind, losing the hearts of the servants. Now, all she could give was still the same amount of silvers. As the young mistress, this is all I can take out. It's just for the sake of auspiciousness and celebration. This is the truth, not the face. If you don't mind, then keep it. If you do your job well, I'll use your young master's family wealth to reward you in the future. Sang-won said half-jokingly. Everyone could not help but laugh when they heard that. Shi Fengju also smiled slightly. The unhappiness in everyone's heart also disappeared. How could they not know the young mistress's family wealth? Wasn't it just for the sake of auspiciousness? Who among the servants in this courtyard would really lack this little bit of money? Moreover, the young mistress had already said that there would be plenty of time in the future, so there was no need to worry about not getting any benefits. Didn't they see that the young master had tacitly agreed to this? Since the young mistress has said so, I'll ask the kitchen to prepare 2 tables of banquet tonight. You all can go and have a seat. Tell the kitchen to pay for it from my account. Xing Ji, you arrange it. Shi Fengju had the good spirit of helping people to the end, so he also joined in with a smile. Everyone's eyes lit up and their faces were full of smiles. It was rare for the young master to give face, so who wouldn't like it? Thinking that the young master only said this for the sake of the young mistress, everyone looked at Sang-won in a different light. Luya was also very happy and smiled more happily than anyone else. Shi Fengju saw that the act was more or less done. He felt somewhat restrained and uncomfortable with Sang Wan, so he said that he had something else to do and left. Sang Wan and everyone hurriedly got up to send him off. After that, everyone clustered around Sang Wan and escorted her back to her room. They were much more attentive than before. Sang Wan didn't let go of this excellent opportunity to win over people's hearts. She spoke with everyone for a while before ordering them to leave. She couldn't help but sigh in her heart. In the end, she was also responsible for what happened in her previous life. She was too pretentious and too passive. If it weren't for that miserable death as a precedent, perhaps it would be difficult for her to change her temperament in this life. At night, they had dinner together in Wang's courtyard. The two of them couldn't help but put on another act. The husband and wife were harmonious and respectful to each other. They were also very respectful and courteous to her. Wang was very pleased to see this and frequently nodded with a smile. Speaking of this marriage, Wang was also against it. However, as soon as this thought appeared, she immediately suppressed it. After all, this was the will of her father-in-law and husband. As their daughter-in-law and wife, she had to adhere to their decision. This was the last thing she could do for them. Unless Sang Wan was a cripple with missing arms and legs or a notorious evil woman in the village, she would definitely marry her into the family. As for the other things, she could only put them aside for the time being. Gu Fengzi intentionally or unintentionally avoided everyone's gaze and secretly conveyed goodwill and friendliness to Sang Wan. From time to time, she would smile warmly at her. Every time she smiled, Sang Wan would politely smile back. Although she knew that she didn't have good intentions, why couldn't she play along with her act? At night, when the two of them were left in the room, they couldn't help but feel a little awkward. Tonight, there were servant girls on night duty in the small partition outside the room. Obviously, it was impossible for Shi Fengju to sleep in the outer room like last night. As newlyweds, it was even more impossible for him to sleep in the study. For a moment, he seemed to be in a more difficult position than Sang Wan. "It's getting late. You sleep on the bed, I'll sleep on the floor." Shi Fengju quickly made up his mind. He quietly took the bedding from the cabinet and spread it on the carpet in front of the bed. He took off his outer robe and pulled the quilt over himself. When he was about to lie down, he suddenly looked up at Sang Wan and hesitated. Chapter 8. Sang Wan had already gotten into bed and was silently leaning against the headboard, watching him busy himself. When she saw him looking at her, her expression became a little sluggish, and then her face became a little unnatural and slightly hot. Fortunately, the light was dim, so Shi Fengju couldn't see her face clearly. "Well, I usually don't get up at night." Sang Wan lowered her eyes and said in a low voice. If she wanted to get up at night, she would definitely disturb the maids outside to serve her. If the maids saw this scene in the bedroom, it would be terrible. Shi Fengju was embarrassed when he heard this. He lowered his head and nodded randomly. "If you want to get up, just call me." This would give him time to put away the bedding temporarily. "Okay." Sang Wan agreed in a low voice. She reached out and gently pulled down the gauze curtain, then lay down on her side and lay down steadily. There was a slight rustling sound in her ears. Shi Fengju also lay down. In the corner of the room, an oil lamp with a red veil was emitting a faint yellow light. The room was quiet and peaceful. This kind of life was actually very good. Sang Wan wrapped the brocade quilt tightly around her body. A faint fragrance rushed into her nose, and she fell asleep. Shi Fengju got up early, so Sang Wan naturally couldn't sleep anymore. Hearing Shi Fengju get up, Sang Wan also sat up. She pulled on her robe and simply put it on. She leaned out of bed and nodded at Shi Fengju with a smile. "Good morning, Dalang." "Well, good morning." Shi Fengju didn't expect her to do this, so he didn't react for a moment. "Eldest young master. Eldest young mistress." Xingji's voice sounded outside, and there was a faint sound of the maid's light footsteps. Xingji had served in Ning Garden for many years, so she knew Shi Fengju's habits like the back of her hand. She expected Shi Fengju to have gotten up at this time, so she gently knocked on the door and wanted to come in to serve him. Wait! Shi Fengju and Sang Wan exclaimed at the same time, their voices filled with the same panic. The bedding on the ground was still openly displayed. If they were to barge in and see it, then there would be no need to say anything more. Shi Fengju hurriedly grabbed the quilt and was about to stuff it into the wardrobe when Sang Wan hurriedly pulled him back. She gestured with her eyes for him to put it down and whispered, "Let me do it." As he spoke, he hurriedly flattened the quilt. His palms brushed across the top of the quilt to make it even. After that, he neatly folded it up and did the same with the mattress. If she crumpled it into a ball and put it in the cupboard, who knew if a maidservant would open it and see it when she was packing up? Shi Fengju knew how to make a bed, but how could he know how to fold it? This kind of work could only be done by women. In any case, she was used to it. When Shi Fengju saw that she had neatly folded it, he smiled and nodded at her to express his gratitude. Then, both of them hugged the quilt and put it into the cupboard. When they saw that there were no flaws, they both felt relieved. "Come in." Shi Fengju calmly called out. "Yes." Xingji answered in a low voice and gently pushed the door open. The atmosphere in the room this morning was a bit strange. The maidservants who were waiting on them had a shy expression on their faces. Their eyebrows were lowered, and there was a faint smile on the corners of their lips. Affected by this atmosphere, Sang Wan and Shi Fengju also felt strange. However, they didn't know what was strange about it, so they could only remain silent and let the others do as they pleased. It wasn't until later, when there was no one else around, that Lu Ye couldn't hold back her curiosity and asked Sang Wan in a whisper. Only then did Sang Wan understand what was going on. To everyone's surprise, they all misunderstood the reason behind their panicked and unanimous wait. They thought that they were up to something good. Sang Wan suddenly felt like crying, but no tears came out. She looked up at the sky, speechless. Today, someone from the Shi family's trading company hurried over. Not long after, Shi Fengju left with a person, saying that he had urgent matters to attend to. He left for an entire day before returning. Fortunately, with his performance yesterday, he left his new wife to attend to his own matters. At least the servants in Ning Garden didn't show any harsh ridicule towards Sang Wan. After returning from paying her respects to her mother-in-law, Sang Wan slowly ate her breakfast. She took a stroll in Ning Garden, admiring the flowers and chatting with the maidservants, passing the day leisurely. She finally found her footing. He was stronger than in her previous life, wasn't he? In her previous life, he didn't stay to accompany her on this day. Instead, he brazenly left her alone and didn't know what to do. "Young mistress, I've sent someone to check your dowry from the storehouse. Once they're done, they'll send it to Ning Garden." A daughter-in-law entered Ning Garden and said with a smile. Sang Wan didn't have anyone to accompany her to the room. She only had Lu Ye as her dowry maidservant. Her dowry had to be checked, and only Lu Ye could use it. Sang Wan nodded and called Lu Ye forward to give her a few instructions. She gave her the list of dowry and had her check it with the storehouse. Although she didn't have many things and didn't have anything particularly valuable, her brother and sister-in-law had done their best to help her purchase them. Lu Ye agreed and said with a smile to the daughter-in-law, "I'll have to trouble sister-in-law to lead the way. Please." The daughter-in-law didn't move and looked at Lu Ye from head to toe. She then smiled at Sang Wan and said, "Young mistress, it's better if you send an experienced and capable mother. This is checking the dowry." The implication was that she didn't trust a little servant girl like Lu Ye. Lu Ye was so angry that her face instantly paled. If she heard this in the past, Lu Ye would have jumped up to argue with her. However, when she thought of what Sang Wan had said yesterday, she fiercely suppressed her anger and lowered her eyes without saying anything. Sang Wan also felt a little uncomfortable, but she didn't show it on her face. She still smiled amiably. When she opened her mouth again, her tone was more authoritative and decisive. "Let Lu Ye go. Don't worry, she can read and won't make a mistake. She won't delay your work." The daughter-in-law's face heated up when she heard this. She faked a smile and said, "Young mistress, what are you saying?" If young mistress says it's okay, then it's okay. This servant was just asking for nothing. You're really from a scholarly family. Even a little servant girl can read. Teske, you're really capable. Sangwon heard her words that didn't sound like praise and didn't sound like sarcasm. She clenched her fists and nodded with a smile. Then go quickly. The sooner you go, the sooner you can report back. As she said this, she gave Luya a look. Luya fiercely took a breath and suppressed her anger. She forced a smile and took 2 steps forward. She stretched out her hand to pull the daughter-in-law and smiled amiably. Sister-in-law, please. The daughter-in-law didn't have anything else to say. She could only take her leave and lead Luya away. Looking at their departing backs, Sangwon's eyes flashed. If she didn't have anyone backing her up, or if she hadn't received any orders, the daughter-in-law wouldn't have dared to say such things to her in public, no matter how bold she was. In the end, Luya's skills were still too shallow. Moreover, Luya followed the daughter-in-law. The daughter-in-law didn't stay idle and slowly asked her questions. How old was she? Who else was in the family? How did she get to the Sang family? How long had she been with young mistress? As she asked, she gradually asked about the Sang family and Sangwon. How many people were there in young mistress's family? How was their temperament? How many mu of land did they have? How many rooms did they have? How were their days? What did young mistress do on a daily basis? She wanted to get to the bottom of the matter and investigate all 8 generations of the Sang family's ancestors. Luya used to be a talkative person. Her mouth never stopped chattering. It was best for her to gather information and spread gossip. If it weren't for Sangwon's reminder yesterday, she would have stupidly revealed everything to someone who took the initiative to chat with her. However, with Sangwon's words, Luya became vigilant. How could she be willing to answer? She changed the topic and talked about random things. It seemed like she said a lot, but in reality, she didn't say anything substantial. Instead, she quietly led the conversation and found out a lot of things from the daughter-in-law. The woman suddenly regained her senses and felt that something was wrong. She stopped talking abruptly and glared at Luya resentfully. She cleared her throat and sternly said, "All right, let's not talk about such useless nonsense. Let's go quickly. Madame Zhang is still waiting in the storeroom. I also have other errands to run." "Ah, sister-in-law Ning." Luya responded with a bright smile, as if she didn't see sister-in-law Ning's expression at all. Seeing sister-in-law Ning's sullen expression, Luya was overjoyed. She thought to herself, "You deserve it. Who told you to have bad intentions? Do you think I'm easy to fool?" Madame Zhang and the others were surprised to see that it was a little girl. Madame Zhang frowned and asked sister-in-law Ning a few questions. After confirming, she didn't say much and talked to Luya one by one. Luya recognized many words at such a young age. She also had a sweet mouth and a bright smile. Madame Zhang couldn't help but have a good impression of her. Her expression also became a lot kinder. She quickly explained Sangwon's dowry to her. When she was signing, Madame Zhang saw Luya's neat handwriting and couldn't help but praise her. She kept praising her grandmother's family for living up to its reputation. Luya listened to her and smiled modestly. After that, Madame Zhang left with her people. Luya looked at the 20 or so manservants who were called in from the outer courtyard, as well as a group of servants who did rough work. They picked and carried these things to Ning Garden. This was originally a very simple matter, so Sangwon didn't take it to heart. Who knew that a young maidservant would rush in from outside and anxiously say, young mistress, it's not good. Older sister Luya is quarreling with someone and is about to fight. Young mistress, you should go and take a look. I'm afraid older sister Luya will suffer." Sangwon was shocked and hurriedly asked why. The maidservant looked embarrassed and said, This servant didn't hear anything clearly. I just saw someone drop young mistress's dowry on the ground. Older sister Luya quarreled with them. I don't know what they said, but older sister Luya cried." Sangwon felt dizzy. This Luya was really troublesome. She had already warned her repeatedly, so why was she still so impulsive? This was the Shi family, not the Sang family. If she made a big fuss like this, how would she have a good time in the future? But in the end, she was still one of her people. Sang-won couldn't just ignore her. She immediately brought Xing-ji, Hong-yi, and the others over. When Sang-won arrived, she saw that Wang's confidant, Nanny Jiang, was already there and was giving orders angrily. She couldn't help but be shocked and hurriedly quickened her pace. "Oh, young mistress is also here." Nanny Jiang also saw Sang-won and immediately went forward to greet her with a smile. She looked around with a reproachful gaze, as if blaming those who ran over to talk to Sang-won. Chapter 9. When Sang-won saw that Nanny Jiang had already taken care of the matter, she secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Observing Nanny Jiang's expression, she saw that Nanny Jiang was slightly uncomfortable, so she tactfully didn't ask directly. She smiled and raised her hand to Nanny Jiang. "Nanny Jiang is too polite." As she spoke, she glanced at Luya and said with a smile, "This is the first time this girl has done something. I saw that she hasn't returned after so long, so I was afraid that she was insensible and would cause trouble, so I came to take a look." Nanny Jiang Yu, after speaking, Sang-won looked at Nanny Jiang in confusion. Old slave was also passing by. He saw that they had a small misunderstanding, so he said a few words. "It's fine now. Old slave has to go back to serve eldest madam. Eldest young mistress should also go back." Nanny Jiang quickly said, "I see. Since it's a small misunderstanding, then you can all disperse. Do what you need to do." Sang-won nodded her head gently and sighed at Luya. "You're such a troublemaker. Our household is a family with rules. Let's not talk about misunderstandings. Even if something were to happen, there will always be a head servant to deal with it. Look at you, how can a small misunderstanding cause Nanny Jiang to come? Fortunately, Nanny Jiang is a warm-hearted and kind person, so she won't bicker with you." No matter what happened, if Nanny Jiang defined the matter as a small misunderstanding, then it was a small misunderstanding and nothing else. How could Nanny Jiang be so idle? Sang-won naturally didn't believe that she just happened to pass by. Behind her was her mother-in-law, Wang, and her intentions were naturally her mother-in-law's intentions. Since it was a misunderstanding, there was no need for her to ask in detail. Otherwise, wouldn't she be openly opposing her mother-in-law? Luya understood Sang-won's meaning, but she didn't explain. She lowered her head and admitted her mistake. "It's all this servant's fault. I've troubled Nanny Jiang. Please don't take it to heart." How could I? I don't deserve such praise." Nanny Jiang hurriedly smiled and finally felt relieved. Sang-won smiled and said, "Then I won't delay Mama's time." "Mama, please." "Young mistress, you should go back too." Nanny Jiang smiled and raised her hand. Sang-won didn't say anything more. She nodded slightly at her and instructed Luya to bring some people to follow her. She left first with Xing-ji and the others. When Nanny Jiang saw her leave, she also left. All the dowry was stored in the small warehouse in the west side courtyard of Ning Garden. Sang-won asked Luya to stay and talk with her. Only then did she know the whole story. As it turned out, 2 manservants who were carrying the chest had accidentally broken it when they were walking down the stairs. The chest of fine cotton cloth, fine linen cloth, and plain silk rolled out. When Luya saw this, she couldn't help but say a few words, telling them to quickly pack up their things. The 2 men's faces were full of reluctance. They did accept it, but when they were packing up, they deliberately rubbed the cloth on the ground or, accidentally, stepped on it, leaving large footprints. Luya was angry and anxious, so she told them to be careful. When the 2 men heard this, they became excited and whispered mockingly. They said that this kind of cloth was only suitable for the manners coachman to wear and was only suitable for wiping the ground. It didn't matter if it was ruined, they wouldn't need it in the future anyway. They even jokingly asked Luya, "Don't tell me that young mistress will wear clothes made of this kind of stuff in the future." Luya was so angry that her face turned red. The servants who were watching the show all laughed loudly and joked with each other. They said a lot of things that were even more unpleasant to hear. Luya was so angry and embarrassed that she couldn't help but quarrel with them. She was so angry that she almost cried because of their sarcastic words. When Sang-won heard this, her hands clenched tightly. She squeezed the handkerchief in her hand and trembled slightly. Sure enough, everyone in the Shi family had a pair of snobbish eyes. Even the servants who were carrying the boxes dared to openly ridicule her personal maidservant. It was not impossible for them to bully her next step. "Young mistress, this servant is really thinking of the good of our Sang family." Luya's eyes were filled with tears. She glanced at the beautiful decorations in the room and sighed bitterly. No matter how good this place is, it's still not our home. Sang-won felt wronged and depressed. However, she had already entered the Shi family, so what else could she do? She had to continue living like this. Or, just like in her previous life, she could retreat step by step and die miserably in a corner, uncared for and uncared for. Or, she could fight hard and still have a chance to break out of the cocoon and become a butterfly. Enough. Isn't it just a few words of gossip? I don't even take it to heart, so what are you feeling wronged for? Sang-won's voice was extremely bitter and gloomy, but she had no choice but to pull herself together and persuade Luya with a smile. At the same time, she gave herself confidence. "Young mistress," Luya looked at her and said softly, "this servant is only feeling wronged on behalf of young mistress. Although our Sang family isn't rich, we don't have to worry about food and clothing. Young mistress, when have you ever suffered such sarcastic remarks? These people's words are really sharper than a knife. There isn't a single good person in this city," Luya said hatefully. Sang-won was amused by her and laughed out loud. She held her hand and said softly, "It's all right. We live our own lives, not for them to see. It's fine if they hear gossip, but there's no need to take it to heart. Luya, we don't care what others think of us, but we can't look down on ourselves. One day, when we can hold our heads high, we'll show them. Yes. What's the big deal right now? I don't believe that we can let them look down on us for the rest of our lives. Humph, if they were compared to us, I'm afraid they'd be worse off than us." Luya puffed out her chest and raised her chin. "That's the right way to think," Sang-won said. "Go and think about it carefully. What did you do wrong in this matter? If you encounter something similar in the future, how should you deal with it?" Seeing that her expression was slightly unconvinced, Sang-won sighed softly and said, "Think about it yourself. What's the point of arguing with others like that?" Luya's expression suddenly became sluggish. That's right. Although it was said that people would cry out when things were unfair, they still had to look at the situation and the target. Otherwise, they would only be asking for humiliation and a snub. Just like this time, her argument seemed so pale and powerless. She might even be treated as a joke. "This servant will remember," Luya said softly. Sang-won nodded and ordered her to go and rest. Secretly thinking about this matter, she subconsciously thought of Gu Fengzi. She couldn't be blamed for being suspicious. It was just that Gu Fengzi's character was too suspicious. In the main courtyard, Wang heaved a sigh of relief after hearing Nanny Zhang's words and said, "That was close." The Sang family was inferior to the Shi family, but Sang-won had already married into the Shi family. She was the Shi family's daughter-in-law and the master. If she lost face, the Shi family would also lose face. She's still considered smart. She didn't ask too many questions. Otherwise, this matter wouldn't be able to be covered up. Wang said with a sigh. Her own daughter-in-law was mocked and ridiculed by her own family servants. Not only did she feel uncomfortable, if outsiders knew about it, the Shi family would not be able to face anyone in Qingzhou City. Especially that old Mistress Zhuang of the Zhuang family's trading company. She would definitely laugh at her to death. That woman was jealous of the Shi family. Usually, she would find fault with them for no reason. Now that she had a reason, she couldn't help but exaggerate it even more. Have the servants been instructed? If anyone dares to mention a word about this matter again, beat them to death. Those 2 talkative servants will be beaten up and sent to the farmstead to do manual labor. If they still don't behave, send them to the Sichuan forest to cut wood. Humph, I'll rebel against them. Wang gritted her teeth and said angrily, Old mistress, don't worry. The old slave has already instructed. Young mistress is also an understanding person. She won't mention it again, Nanny Jiang quickly said. Wang was at ease with Nanny Jiang's work. Hearing that, she nodded and her expression relaxed. Thinking about it, she was still not satisfied and snorted, Daughter-in-law is right about one thing. What did those stewards and housekeepers do for a living? How can there be such unruly people in our household? Today's matter is a small matter, but if this blind person were to cause a big mess in the future, it would be terrible. Instruct the servants to keep a close watch. In a few days, call those stewards to see me. I want to clarify things with them personally. Yes, old mistress. Nanny Jiang knew that her mistress was someone who cared about her face the most. Now that this matter had happened, she would naturally find a few people to bear her anger. This time, it was unknown who would be the unlucky one. The disgust in Wang's heart finally subsided. After pondering for a moment, she said, Daughter-in-law has been wronged in this matter. Do you think I should reward her with something to calm her down? Nanny Jiang was a little speechless. She thought to herself, You just drank daughter-in-law's tea and rewarded her with a gift yesterday. This matter is clearly a small misunderstanding, and you didn't even come out to deal with it. Rewarding her for no reason, isn't this just looking for trouble? Old slave, young mistress seems to have a calm temperament and knows the big picture. Presumably. Besides, young mistress still has to cook tonight. It won't be too late to reward her when you like it. According to Qingzhou's custom, a new daughter-in-law would prepare a special meal for her parents-in-law the day after she married into the family. This was to show that the new daughter-in-law was clever, virtuous, and capable. Right, I actually forgot about this matter. Then let's talk about it tonight. Wang slapped her forehead and said with a smile, Later, help me find a pair of high-quality golden hairpins to prepare. Nanny Jiang hurriedly agreed and left. Wang was impatient and couldn't wait until night-time. She sent someone to call her concubine-born daughter, Shi Lian, and niece, Shi Rui, to go to Ning Garden together and chat with Sang Wan. When Sang Wan saw Shi Lian and Shi Rui coming together, she was greatly surprised. Shi Lian could still talk to her. Shi Rui had just turned 11 and was still a delicate and naive little girl who didn't know anything. However, which new daughter-in-law wouldn't be afraid of their younger sister-in-law? Sang Wan was the same. With a face full of smiles, she happily got up and personally welcomed them into the room to sit down. Shi Lian's birth mother, concubine Ro, had already passed away. She was raised by her first mother, who was easily swayed, had an unstable temperament, and was naturally suspicious. She had always been cautious and careful. She spent most of her time cooped up in her room doing needlework and making clothes, shoes, and socks for her first mother and 2 older brothers. She rarely even went to the garden, let alone come out to visit. Shi Rui was also born from concubine Fang of the second branch, but concubine Fang was favored by the second Lord Shi. Shi Rui was also good-looking, young, and lively. Chapter 10. In her previous life, Sang Wan did not know much about her sister-in-law. Seeing that she had a quiet personality, she did not know what to say. Shi Lian was under the orders of her official mother to come over for a visit. She had always been wise to protect herself, so she had nothing to say to her sister-in-law whom she was not familiar with. Fortunately, there was a chattering little girl around, so Sang Wan and Shi Lian did not have to sit there awkwardly. More or less, there were some things that they could talk about. Except for Shi Rui, Sang Wan and Shi Lian felt that this kind of interaction was a kind of torture. It was a play that they had to put on. After a while, Gu Fengzi also came in with a smile. When she saw the 3 of them, she clapped her hands and said with a smile, Cousin-in-law, it's so lively here. Cousin-in-law, you're really popular. I didn't expect you to be so familiar with my two younger cousins as soon as you married in. My two younger cousins have never been to Peony Park so thoroughly. Gu Fengzi's voice was tender and clear, like the chirping of an oriole. When they heard it, the three of them couldn't help but smile and feel happy. Sang Wan called out, "Younger cousin," and said a few modest words to Gu Fengzi. Shi Lian and Shi Rui hurriedly called out, "Older cousin." The room suddenly became much livelier and more easygoing. "Of course not. I want to go to older cousin's place to play." Unfortunately, older cousin and older cousin are always busy with the matters of the company. If not, she's with older aunt. By the time older cousin returns, the sky will be dark. I can't go to play even if I want to. I've heard that older cousin's courtyard has good peonies. I really want to go and take a look. Shi Rui blinked her grape-like big eyes and smiled sweetly. She was completely unaware of the embarrassment her words brought. Gu Fengzi's expression suddenly froze and her face turned slightly red. Even though the relationship between her and Shi Fengju was known by everyone in the Fu, and even Wang had tacitly agreed to it, she still felt guilty when a little girl said this in front of Sang Wan. When Shi Rui opened her mouth to speak, Shi Lian held the blue and white flower teacup in her hands and carefully admired the patterns on it. She was so focused and intoxicated that she didn't pay attention to the outside world. Shi Lian could play dumb, but Sang Wan was not so lucky. She could only play dumb and pretend to be interested. She smiled at Shi Rui and said, "Fifth sister, you seem to like flowers. I wonder what kind of flowers there are in the garden at this time of the year. When the weather is good, let's go for a walk." Shi Lian raised her eyes slightly and glanced at Sang Wan. Then, she lowered her eyes and continued to play with the teacup in her hand. Gu Fengzi felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted from her shoulders. She hurriedly smiled and said, "Cousin-in-law is right. When the weather is good, we should go for a walk. Aunt's garden has all kinds of famous flowers. Every year when the flowers bloom, it's so beautiful." Shi Rui was a child who liked to be lively. Hearing this, she smiled and clapped her hands. She tilted her head and thought for a moment. Then, she said to Sang Wan, "When I passed by the garden yesterday, I saw that the gardenias in the Fengyuan garden were in full bloom. They were so white that I could smell their fragrance from far away. Sister-in-law, cousin, why don't we go and have some fun tomorrow?" Tomorrow? Tomorrow, Sang Wan would return home 3 days later. Thinking that Shi Fengju would return home with Sang Wan tomorrow morning, Gu Fengzi couldn't help but feel a little sour in her heart. Her eyes flashed with unwillingness. She stretched out her white and tender finger and gently touched Shi Rui's forehead. She said softly with a smile, "You don't care about anything when you talk about having fun. You can't wait to go now. However, you can't do it tomorrow. Tomorrow, your sister-in-law has to return home." "Return home? What do you mean by return home?" Shi Rui was startled and asked innocently. The maids all pursed their lips and snickered. Sang Wan and Gu Fengzi also laughed. Shi Lian finally finished admiring the teacup in her hand. She gently put it down and also laughed. Shi Rui was baffled by everybody's laughter. She looked at this one, looked at that one, and asked in confusion, Did I say something wrong? What do you know as a child?" Gu Fengzi intimately glanced at Sang Wan and said with a smile, "Returning home means returning home. Tomorrow, your sister-in-law has to return home. After a few days, when the weather is warmer, we can go to the garden to play in the afternoon with the sun shining. We can also fly kites. What do you think?" Since Gu Fengzi took the initiative to help her out, Sang Wan naturally gave her a grateful glance and nodded slightly at her. Shi Rui replied with an "oh." She didn't quite understand. However, when she heard that she could fly kites, she couldn't help but feel happy again. She grinned and clapped her hands. Then, she excitedly talked about the big swallow kite in her room. "We've been sitting for a while. It's time to go back. We won't disturb sister-in-law any longer," Shi Lian said with a tired smile. "That's right." Gu Fengzi also nodded with a smile. Then, she turned to Sang-won and said with a smile, "We won't disturb sister-in-law any longer. Sister-in-law still has to cook later. I'll secretly tell sister-in-law that my aunt likes to eat winter melon soup the most. If sister-in-law makes this, I'm sure my aunt will be very happy." "Really?" Thank you for your advice." Sang-won's eyes lit up and she smiled. However, her hand that was holding the handkerchief tightened. In her previous life, she had kindly reminded her, and she had indeed made a winter melon soup. However, the winter melon soup had been tampered with. Wang Shi had an allergic reaction and developed a rash all over her face. She had been ridiculed by Madame Zhuang for a long time, and because of this, Wang Shi hated her to the core and never wanted to see her again. "You're too polite, sister-in-law." Gu Fengzi giggled and winked at her mischievously. Then, she left with Shi Lian and Shi Rui. Sang-won secretly sighed. Winter melon soup. Winter melon soup. Since Gu Fengzi had said in front of so many people that Wang liked winter melon soup the most, if she didn't make it, it would seem that she didn't take Wang seriously. It would seem that she deliberately didn't accept Gu Fengzi's kindness. Even if she didn't want to make this winter melon soup, she still had to make it. Although it was said that the new daughter-in-law would cook the dishes, it was actually just the kitchen making a list of dishes for the new daughter-in-law to choose from. Other than 1 or 2 dishes that the new daughter-in-law would personally cook, the rest would still be made by the kitchen. Otherwise, how could the new daughter-in-law have the energy to make an entire table of dishes by herself? In her previous life, Sang-won had made winter melon soup and steamed mandarin fish. Since she couldn't get rid of the winter melon soup, Sang-won simply decided to make these 2 dishes. When she selected the menu and told Lady Jian in the kitchen, Lady Jian clapped her hands and said with a smile, "What a coincidence. Today, we just got 2 big fresh mandarin fish. Old slave was just about to suggest to young mistress that we use these to make the soup. There's also winter melon soup. That's what old mistress likes, so it's just right to make it." Sang-won smiled and nodded. "I'll make these 2 dishes. The rest will be up to you. Young mistress is too polite. This is old slave's duty," Lady Jian hurriedly said with a smile. Sang-won didn't hesitate. She immediately put on an apron, rolled up her sleeves, and busied herself with Luya. The 2 of them were used to doing housework when they were in their parents' home, so they weren't unfamiliar with the kitchen at all. One of them scraped the scales of the mandarin fish and cut it open, while the other hollowed out the winter melon and washed it in an orderly manner. Not long after, the fish was washed clean. Sang-won took it, marinated it, seasoned it, and placed it on an oval plate. She sprinkled some finely chopped ginger and shredded onions on it, then carefully placed it into the steamer and closed the lid. Luya moved a small stool to the side and sat down to watch the fire. Sang-won had instructed her not to let the fish leave her sight for a moment from the moment it was placed in the steamer until it was placed on the table. On Sang-won's side, the winter melon was already prepared. Small ribs, chicken, red dates, mushrooms, wolfberries, dried bamboo shoots, ham, and other ingredients were also cut into pieces for use. Every dish was personally prepared by Sang-won. When the fish was steaming in the drawer, Sang-won finally let out a sigh of relief. "Young mistress, it's so smoky here. Why don't you sit outside and rest for a while? We'll take care of it." Lady Jian saw the situation and came over with a smile. It hadn't even been 2 days since they entered the family, but they had already been provoked and plotted against so many times. Moreover, there was the lesson of blood from their previous lives hanging high above their heads. Other than Lu Ye, Sang-won didn't dare to trust anyone else. She smiled and shook her head. "It's fine. You guys do what you need to do. I'll take care of the fire myself." Lady Jian didn't insist. She smiled and praised, "Young mistress is so attentive and filial." Then she really went to do her own things. The firewood in the stove burned steadily. The temperature was just right and it was neither too fast nor too slow. Sang-won silently stared at the dancing flames in the stove. She secretly relaxed. This time, she would personally take care of things from beginning to end. This time, there shouldn't be any problems, right? Unexpectedly, just as this thought flashed through her mind, Xingji's voice came from outside. "Young mistress! Young mistress!" Sangwon's heart sank. She suddenly had a bad feeling. What's wrong? Although Sangwon heard Xingji's voice, she still didn't go out. Instead, she waited in the kitchen. At this moment, unless the kitchen was on fire, she definitely wouldn't take a step out. Seeing that she didn't go out, Xingji walked in herself. She curtsied to her and said, "Young mistress, young master is back. He said that he needs the key urgently." Sangwon remembered the key. In the morning, when Shi Fengju left in a hurry, 2 keys fell from his body. Xingji said that these 2 keys were carried by young master and no one dared to touch them. Sangwon had no choice but to keep them with her. She wanted to give them to him when he came back at night. Who knew that he would need them urgently at this time? "Then you can give them to young master." Sangwon smiled and took out the keys from her body and handed them to Xingji. "Young mistress." Xingji took a step back and didn't take them. She smiled and said, "Young mistress, you should personally give this to young master. This key is young master's treasure. This servant doesn't dare to touch it." Xingji naturally didn't want to touch such a sensitive thing. She didn't want to attract any suspicion. Sangwon almost choked and fainted. How could her luck be so good? Could it be that this was heaven's will that she couldn't escape? She was trembling with fear and careful with every step. She was just 1 step away. Was she destined to be taken advantage of? "Young mistress, you should go quickly. Young master is still waiting." "Oh, this servant will help young mistress look after him." Xingji saw Sangwon's hesitation and said tactfully. Since he had already said so much, it would be unreasonable for Sangwon to continue delaying. Shi Fengju was her husband. Her husband was the heavens and her husband's words were the imperial edict. If she didn't obey the edict, she wouldn't want to live anymore. This great god was directly related to her life and death. She couldn't afford to offend him. Chapter 11. "Okay, I'll be back soon. Help me keep watch." Sangwon sighed silently. She turned around and hurried back to Ning Garden. After giving the key to Shi Fengju, Sangwon continued to rush back to the kitchen. Shi Fengju knew that she was going to cook tonight, so he didn't say much to her and let her go. As she walked, Sangwon's footsteps gradually slowed down. The temperature of the steamed winter melon soup was different from that of the steamed mandarin fish. Her stove was far away from Lu Ya's. Moreover, Xingji had already said that she would help her keep watch. In that case, she couldn't ask Lu Ya to help her keep watch. Wouldn't that embarrass Xingji in front of her? Moreover, the winter melon soup had been out of her sight for so long. Xingji wasn't her, so she didn't have her guard up. If someone wanted to tamper with the soup, they would have had enough time to do so. Whether or not they had tampered with the soup, she couldn't take the risk. If Wang's face was covered in rashes like in her previous life, Sangwon didn't even dare to think about the consequences. She absolutely couldn't send the winter melon soup to Wang. What should she do? Sangwon looked up at the empty sky. The sun was gradually setting in the west, and the sky was bright and beautiful like a dream. However, Sangwon felt that she was about to have a nightmare. Her eyes fell on a big tree with luxuriant branches and leaves. Sangwon's eyes lit up. This was a Chinese toadstool tree. She remembered that her mother-in-law liked both winter melon soup and Chinese toadstool. Unfortunately, the Chinese toadstool had already grown branches and leaves. It was past the season to eat Chinese toadstool. However, the light in Sangwon's eyes gradually gathered and she gradually became determined. She curled her lips and sneered silently. Tonight, she would make this tofu with Chinese tofu. It was true that the Chinese tune sprouts couldn't be used anymore, but the old bark of the Chinese tune tree was boiled in water to filter out the impurities. Then, the small green sprouts were soaked in the filtered Chinese tune water for half an hour before they were finely chopped. They looked like Chinese tune sprouts. Then, the tofu was also put in the Chinese tune water. When the two were mixed together, the flavor of the Chinese tune was full and almost authentic. In her previous life, Gu Fengzi had cooked this dish for her mother-in-law, Wang, when there was no Chinese tune available. Her mother-in-law was overjoyed after tasting the dish and praised Gu Fengzi for her ingenuity. Now that she was learning from him, it wasn't a bad idea. Sang Wan immediately got to work. She called a servant over and peeled off 2 pieces of old Chinese tune bark. She took it to the kitchen and started cooking according to Gu Fengzi's instructions. This caused Lady Jian and the others to click their tongues in amazement. When the winter melon soup came out of the pot, Sang Wan quickly stepped on one of the kitchen maid's skirts and quietly dodged to the side. That kitchen maid cried out in pain and bumped into the servant girl who was carefully holding the winter melon soup. That servant girl cried out in alarm and the winter melon soup in her hands fell to the ground. The commotion here alarmed everyone. Everyone looked over and their expressions changed as they looked at each other. This servant deserves to die. This servant deserves to die. This servant didn't do it on purpose, this servant. That servant girl and kitchen maid were so scared that their faces turned white. One was begging for forgiveness and the other was trying to explain. Both of them were panicking. This wasn't an ordinary dish. This was a dish that the young mistress, as the new daughter-in-law, made for her mother-in-law. It wasn't something that could be removed with a few words of apology. The two of them knew this and their legs went soft as they knelt down. Sang Wan didn't say anything, but her brows were slightly knitted together. She pursed her lips and her expression was indifferent. She was the new daughter-in-law. If she used her status to reprimand them, it would inevitably appear arrogant. If she took the initiative to forgive them, it would be too disgraceful. It was most appropriate to silently express her dissatisfaction and displeasure like this. In her previous life, she was too gentle and kind to others. As a result, everyone dared to step on her head. Most people in this world were like this. Only with fear would there be respect. Once her dignity was lost, it would be difficult to establish it again. In any case, if she didn't say anything, someone would say something. Lady Jian groaned inwardly. She was the steward. If her subordinates didn't do a good job, she would have to bear some responsibility. She immediately rushed forward and sternly reprimanded the kitchen maid and the servant girl. She then turned to Sang Wan and bowed to apologize. She then said with a smile, "These 2 servants don't know the severity of the matter and should be punished. Young mistress, don't worry. Old slave will definitely punish them severely and give young mistress a satisfactory explanation. However, since things have already come to this, the winter melon soup, speaking of which, young mistress had the foresight to make a dish of tofu with Chinese tofu. Old slave can just serve the steamed mandarin fish and tofu with Chinese tofu. Young mistress, dinner is more important now. It won't be long before it's time to eat. These 2 servants deserve to die. I won't let them off easily in the future." When Lady Jian spoke, the kitchen maids also spoke up to help plead for leniency. The 2 kneeling on the ground also repeatedly begged for forgiveness. The young girl was so frightened that she was on the verge of sobbing. Sang Wan saw that it was about time and sighed helplessly. Sister-in-law Jian is right. Young mistress's dinner is more important. Now isn't the time to talk about this. Her gaze fell on the winter melon soup that had fallen to the ground. She sighed regretfully with a deep sense of helplessness and reluctance. When Lady Jian and the culprit saw this, they felt even more ashamed and apologetic. Lady Jian gritted her teeth and said, "Young mistress, these 2 servants are too troublesome. They actually caused such a ruckus on such a good day. Young mistress, please tell us how to punish them." "Old slave will do as you say." Lady Jian cursed her bad luck in her heart. After thinking it over, she decided to let Sang Wan make the decision herself and follow her own wishes. This would make her feel better and she herself wouldn't be blamed. "Oh, no matter what, you will do as I say." Sang Wan raised her eyebrows and gave Lady Jian a faint smile. Lady Jian's heart thumped and she suddenly felt a little uncertain. The words had already been spoken and there was no room for her to go back on her words. Lady Jen could only brace herself and nod. Yes, old slave will do as you say. Sangwon curled her lips and smiled slightly. She smiled at the two trembling servants kneeling on the ground and said, "Get up first. I can see that you two are honest people. It's just a small accident, I won't punish you." The two were stunned for a moment and looked at each other, thinking that they had heard wrongly. On the other hand, Lady Jen and everyone else heaved a sigh of relief and smiled. "What are you still standing there for? Quickly get up. Are you waiting for young mistress to help you up?" Lady Jen laughed and scolded. She then smiled at Sangwon and said, "Thank you, young mistress, for your grace. Young mistress is really benevolent. Thank you, young mistress, for your grace." The two servants seemed to have woken up from a dream and quickly kowtowed before getting up happily. Sangwon smiled at Lady Jen and said, "They can be exempted from punishment, but you are the steward here. You can't just let it go like this, right? What do you think?" "Young mistress, this..." Lady Jen's relieved heart tightened again and her eyes narrowed. She looked at Sangwon and felt bitterness in her mouth. What kind of play was this? No one would forgive a servant who had committed a crime and go find trouble with the steward. Everyone, including the two servants who got up from the ground, widened their eyes in disbelief when they heard this. Sangwon smiled and said, "This is simple. You must have worked in the kitchen for many years, right?" Seeing Madame Jen nod her head mechanically, Sangwon continued, "Then in the future, I'll have to ask Madame Jen to teach me how to cook. As a daughter-in-law, I should be filial to my mother-in-law and serve my husband well. Sister-in-law Jen, please." "I-oh, my young mistress." Hearing this, Lady Jen relaxed and patted her chest. She smiled and said, "Your joke is too big. It almost scared old slave's heart out of his chest. All right, it's nothing. As long as young mistress comes over, old slave will definitely teach you no matter what time it is. Old slave is very clear about young mistress and young master's preferences. Young mistress is really filial. Yes. Virtuous." It was a false alarm. The atmosphere relaxed and everyone couldn't help but laugh. Sangwon also laughed and waved her hand. "All right, everyone can get back to work. I'm afraid the dishes will be served soon. Sister-in-law Jen, keep an eye on them." "Young mistress, don't worry." Lady Jen responded with a crisp laugh. Sangwon smiled and nodded. After this storm, she expected that at least no one would dare to have any evil thoughts today. Even if they had the intention, it would be difficult to get the chance. The table was set with 12 dishes and 1 soup. Only Wang, Shi Fengju, Shi Lian, and Gu Fengzi were sitting at the table. The people from the second branch didn't come over. Shi Fengju had a younger brother, San Lang, Shi Fenghua, who was studying at Yuanchong Academy. He had only been back for 2 days. After Sangwon offered him tea yesterday, he returned to the academy. Sangwon stood obediently by Wang's side, serving her with clean silver chopsticks and a white round plate. The 2 dishes that she had personally made, steamed mandarin fish and tofu with Chinese tofu, were placed in front of Wang. Gu Fengzi had told Sangwon that she liked winter melon soup, so Wang also knew about it. At this time, when she didn't see any winter melon soup on the table, Wang's expression became somewhat unsightly. She clearly knew what she liked, but deliberately didn't make it. What was the meaning of this? Sangwon originally wanted to find the right time to explain the reason. At this moment, when she saw Wang's expression, she was startled. She couldn't wait for the right time. It was more important to seize the opportunity first. "Mother, daughter-in-law originally wanted to make steamed mandarin fish and your favorite winter melon soup. However, that winter melon soup was accidentally knocked over by a little girl. It's all daughter-in-law's fault for being useless. So daughter-in-law hurriedly made this tofu with Chinese tofu. Mother, have a taste. Tofu with Chinese tofu." Wang's attention was immediately attracted by her. She glanced at the plate next to the steamed mandarin fish and said with a smile, "That's it? Hee hee, where would you find Chinese tofu in this season? But now that you mention it, it has aroused my appetite. I was just thinking about this dish. Mother, have a taste. Sang-won saw that Wong's face revealed a smile and didn't mention the winter melon soup again. She knew that she had passed and quickly took advantage of the situation to carefully place a piece of tofu in front of Wong's bowl with her chopsticks. Wong tilted her head and looked at her. She smiled and picked up the chopsticks to taste a mouthful. After chewing carefully, her eyes suddenly lit up. She smiled and nodded. Not bad, not bad. It really is Chinese tofu. Come, come, all of you have a taste and see if it tastes the same. Wong was in a good mood, so no one was stupid enough to dampen her mood. They all smiled and tried a mouthful of tofu with their chopsticks and smiled in agreement. This is strange. Where would you find Chinese tofu in this season? Wan Nyong, tell us about it and let us broaden our horizons. Wong joked. Chapter 12. As long as Mother doesn't laugh at me, I wouldn't dare to say that I'm knowledgeable. Sang-won smiled and softly recounted what had happened. Wong praised her incessantly and held her hand. It must have been hard on you. Only you could come up with such an exquisite and clever idea. You are indeed a lady from a scholarly family. Your thoughts are indeed different. Thinking about how she had married a good daughter-in-law, Wong smiled happily and pondered about when she should invite old Mistress Zhuang over to admire the flowers so that she could witness her daughter-in-law's cleverness. Let's see if she could still mock and gloat about the marriage between the Shi family and the Sang family. With that thought, Wong looked at Sang-won with even more satisfaction and praised her with a smile. Gu Fengzi, on the other hand, was so angry that she felt dizzy. Coincidentally, a few days ago, she had unintentionally heard of the method of making tofu with Chinese tofu. She wanted to embarrass Sang-won in front of her aunt today so that she could make another tofu with Chinese tofu in 2 days' time. After comparing the two, there was no need to worry that Sang-won would be disliked by her aunt. Who would have thought that Sang-won would have gotten the exact same method from somewhere and actually put it into action before her? Furthermore, the winter melon soup that had been tampered with was not served at all. Gu Fengzi could not voice out her bitterness and was secretly sullen. Seeing Wong praising Sang-won, Gu Fengzi blinked her eyes and smiled. Cousin-in-law is really virtuous and clever. What my aunt says is very true. How could any of us think of such a thing? Only cousin-in-law would have thought of it. It's rare that aunt likes it. That winter melon soup didn't splash on cousin-in-law, right? Everyone followed Gu Fengzi's gaze and looked at Sang-won. Shi Fengju was no exception. Shi Fengju asked, "Are you hurt anywhere?" Without waiting for the others to speak, Gu Fengzi joked, "That's right. Are you hurt anywhere? Eldest cousin's heart will ache if he sees this." The smile on Wong's face froze. Sang-won didn't think of the worst at first, but when she caught a glimpse of Wong's expression from the corner of her eye, she couldn't help but be shocked. Wong was a mother. No mother would like to hear her son express his concern for his daughter-in-law in front of her. However, Gu Fengzi was the one who deliberately led him to be explicit. Shi Fengju secretly scolded himself for being talkative. He couldn't say anything else, so he quickly gave Gu Fengzi a helpless look and forced a smile. Wong saw this smile, which was no doubt a tacit agreement with Gu Fengzi's previous words, and the disgust in her heart increased. Although Sang-won was the wife and Gu Fengzi was already decided to be the concubine, Gu Fengzi was her niece and had been by her side for many years. Her heart was more or less biased towards Gu Fengzi. Seeing that Sang-won had just entered the door, her son's attention was diverted. He even put aside his cousin who had been with him for many years. How could she feel good in her heart? Sang-won pretended to be stupid and smiled. She looked at Shi Fengju calmly and said with a smile, "Eldest young master, don't worry. I'm fine. I guarantee that I won't delay making a winter melon soup for mother tomorrow." Eldest young master is filial and still cares about the winter melon soup for mother. He's afraid that I won't be able to make it tomorrow because of my injury. Mother, don't worry. I'll personally take care of it tomorrow. I won't ask anyone else to do it. I guarantee that I'll make an excellent one for mother. Wang laughed when she heard these words, and the little bit of disgust in her heart disappeared without a trace. Mother appreciates your good intentions. You still have to go back tomorrow, so there's no need to trouble yourself. There's still plenty of time in the future. Mother will remember it. Although Sang-won's words were a bit far-fetched, they were pleasant to hear. She liked to hear them. Thinking about what Gu Fengzi said just now, wasn't it just a joke? Wang Shi chuckled to herself. Did people become petty when they got older? Why did they take a few jokes so seriously? Gu Fengzi also laughed, but she felt even more depressed in her heart. She really wanted to talk back to Sang-won, but when she thought of Shi Fengju's temperament, she held back. He had already smiled bitterly and helplessly when he said those words just now. If she didn't stop now, he might be disgusted and annoyed. She couldn't do something that didn't make up for the loss. At the same time, Sang-won sighed in her heart. Look, this is Gu Fengzi. She's silent but harbors evil intentions. She's all-pervasive and impossible to guard against. Her words were so pleasant to hear. If she hadn't suffered a great loss in her previous life, she wouldn't have thought so much after hearing her words. Shi Fengju was also afraid that Gu Fengzi would say something else, so he smiled and said to Wang, Mother, the dishes are getting cold. Let's eat first. Aren't you hungry? Yes, yes. Let's eat first. Wang smiled and glanced at Sang-won. Wan Yang, sit down and eat with us. You're also tired today. Sit down quickly. Sang-won smiled and declined a few words before sitting down beside Wang. She still used clean chopsticks to put food in Wang's bowl from time to time. Wang was very happy to be coaxed. Dinner came to a perfect end in a harmonious atmosphere. When Sang-won and Shi Fengju left for Ning Garden, Wang held Shi Fengju's hand and told him that he would accompany her to visit her parents tomorrow. Sang-won thanked her with a smile. They closed the bedroom door and went to bed. With yesterday's start, the two of them cleaned up together this morning. They felt more or less on the same front and fought side by side. It was much easier to get along with each other. Shi Fengju chatted with Sang-won as he laid the mattress on the floor. Shi Fengju subconsciously thought that since the two of them were fake husband and wife, then they had no obligation to serve his mother, Sang-won. He subconsciously ignored the fact that Sang-won was now the Shi family's young mistress in the eyes of outsiders. During dinner, he saw how respectful Sang-won was to his mother. He was pleasantly surprised and grateful. After all, who wouldn't like seeing someone else treat their mother with respect? Rest early. We still have to wake up early tomorrow. Shi Fengju sat on the mattress on the floor and pulled up the brocade quilt to cover himself with it. He smiled at Sang-won. The curtains on the bed had not been lowered. Sang-won was leaning against the headboard with a light blue embroidered robe draped loosely over her shoulders, revealing a corner of her pink satin nightgown. Her glossy black hair was let down and hung in front of her chest from her left shoulder. Coupled with her soft and leisurely posture, her pretty and tranquil facial features made people feel comfortable. Young master, I still have a few words to say to you. Sang-won smiled and spoke with a tone of inquiry. She was a little embarrassed. Looking at a beauty under the light was a different feeling. Shi Fengju wasn't a lecherous person, but he didn't reject or dislike beautiful women. He couldn't help but look at Sang-won again. He sat up straight and nodded with a smile. Just say what you want to say. Sang-won thought for a moment and smiled. Young master, thank you for accompanying me back to my family tomorrow. Shi Fengju knew that Sang-won had something to say when she returned to her family tomorrow. He smiled and said, This is what I should do. You don't have to thank me. Just tell me what you need me to do. She was good to his mother. How could he not return the favor? Why wouldn't he be happy to find an opportunity to return her favor? Sang-won saw that he was so understanding and secretly let out a sigh of relief. She smiled and said, Then I'll be frank. You know our family's situation. I think we should bring fewer people with us tomorrow. 1 or 2 of our trusted aides will accompany us back. There's no need for any extravagance. If too many people go, I'm afraid it'll be inconvenient for my brother and sister-in-law to receive them. I don't have any other intentions. For my marriage, my brother and sister-in-law have already done enough. I don't want to cause any more trouble for them. After Sang-won finished speaking, she looked at Shi Fengju with a pair of beautiful eyes. In her previous life, the return to the Shi family was very extravagant. However, which one of the servants in the Shi family wasn't arrogant? When they arrived at the Sang family, they looked down on everything and were picky about everything. It was inevitable that they would say a few words. How could sister-in-law Fong endure this? At that time, she put on a face and retorted sarcastically. In her anger, even Sang-won had to suffer from her words and face. But what could Sang-won do? She was just a mouse caught in the middle and being bullied. The return to the Shi family ended on a bad note. It would have been fine if the matter could have ended there. Unfortunately, after returning to the Shi family, the people who followed them added oil to the fire. Some of them even slandered in front of Wang, saying how the Sang family was smelly, tough, arrogant, and mean. They didn't put the Shi family in their eyes just because they had studied for a few days. They even ridiculed the Shi family for being filthy rich. These words hit Wang's sore spot. Wang flew into a rage and scolded the Sang family. She then called Sang-won over and found an excuse to teach her a lesson. From then on, she disliked her even more. Shi Fengju immediately recalled what he saw at the Sang family's residence on the day of the wedding. Although he didn't have the heart to look carefully that day, he still saw the general situation. There was a small courtyard with a few fruit trees in front of the door and a vegetable garden behind the house. The house was made of green bricks and tiles. Although it was a little old, it still looked sturdy and clean. It looked like a well-off family in the village. However, it couldn't be compared to the Shi family. That kind of house couldn't even compare to the houses of the Shi family's mothers. That was a problem. If too many people went, it wouldn't be a return to the Shi family, but a slap in the face. Shi Fengju had never been a person who liked to show off. He despised the behavior of rich people who flaunted their wealth. Naturally, he wouldn't be willing to become one of them. I was negligent and didn't think it through, Shi Fengju said with a smile. I'll make arrangements tomorrow. Don't worry. Then I'll thank you first, young master. Sang-won's heart settled and she smiled happily at Shi Fengju. Shi Fengju smiled and shook his head. Sang-won took advantage of the situation and said with a smile, Our family is simple. My second brother is studying at Wanchong Academy. He went back on the day of my wedding and left on the same day. Now, there's only my eldest brother, sister-in-law, nephew, niece, and a nanny to take care of them. Our family isn't very particular about it. If there's any disrespect, young master, please forgive us. Shi Fengju smiled and said, I didn't think much of it at first, but after hearing your words, I'm a little nervous. You said there's nothing particular about it. What if there's something particular about it? Sang-won smiled and said, I'm worrying too much. You're the one who's worrying too much. Shi Fengju also smiled. The two of them went to sleep and didn't talk for the night. Only Sang-won rolled her eyes in the tent. She thought to herself, if you had the experience and memories of your past life like me, you wouldn't think that I'm worrying too much. Her past life seemed to be getting more and more distant. It was like a dream, fleeting and empty. Sang-won was stunned for a moment. She didn't know whether it was an illusion or a real experience. You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.